Okay, Andrew, I'd like to hand over to you. Thank you.
Lovely. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much. Croeso cynnes iawn I chi gyd. A very, very warm welcome to you all to the UK Public Health Register Practitioner Conference and Awards for 2025. Could I just have the next slide, please? I'm going to have to say that each time. We've got somebody operating slides for me today. So it's a very, very warm welcome to the conference. The conference is a virtual event today connecting registrants from across the 4 nations of the UK. And as always, our conference is going to be about advocating excellence and action in public health practice, but doing that together. And I'm really excited to introduce this year's conference, which is based on a focus of systems, careers and innovation. I'm really excited by the programme and tinged with a little bit of sadness because this is my last practitioner conference as chair and board member for UKPHR after 9 years on the board. So we'll introduce you to the new chair-elect from next April later on in the day. But as I say, I'm really excited to have so many people join us for what is a really important annual event. Could I have the next slide, please? Lovely, thanks. As I say, registration is for practitioners right across the UK, and we're really wanting to use today to show and share innovation. Our collaboration with all organisations, including governments and partners and other stakeholders, is really important. So I think you'll see from the programme today, we've got quite a range of speakers and contributions from a diverse range of settings and backgrounds with local, regional, national and indeed international global experience. And I think that's really important for us to hear from different perspectives and to be able to put public health on a really solid footing as we tackle some of the new challenges facing our populations. And the next slide, please. I know you're doing that in a tremendous period of change, both system reforms in one country or another, resource pressures, and again the usual stresses and strains that you face as a workforce. And the UK PHR Register, we just like to applaud all of the work of our registrants in supporting the population day in, day out, and the excellent work that you do. We really do really want to applaud the work that you represent, and we're proud in one sense to be your regulator, showing the public the standards that you practice in supporting on a day-to-day basis. So the conference today, we really hope, will be a platform for you to share approaches. We'll touch on how you can do that a bit later on, but also inspire each other and learn from each other. If I could go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to touch on practitioner registration for a second, because it really is close to my heart. You'll hear a little bit about my own career a little bit later on in the morning, but I started as a practitioner, and until the day I retired, I maintained and was proud to maintain my chartered practitioner status, also with the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health. It's really important that we understand that registration underpins professional standards and public confidence. And as systems sort of become pressured around us, standards and visual assurance really matter more than ever. So for me, registration is a foundation for us all. It's a foundation for impact, but it's also recognised across all health systems, and we'll hear some of that as we go through today. But it's really important, I think, that we understand where registration fits. We'll talk about career pathways a little bit later. They are linked, but they are different, and we'll touch on some of that, I'm sure, in some of our discussions. But I'm really wanting to advocate for practitioner registration and to do all that we can in the register to support the 4 nations to promote that across the whole practitioner workforce. Next slide, please. As you'll know, I hope you've seen and had a look at. If not, it's on the website. UKPHR has worked hard with its stakeholders to produce a 5-year strategy. Part of that strategy, a key part of that strategy is to promote practitioner standards and to promote registration in settings across all the 4 nations. We're committed to developing resources to help you to do that, and to working with partners in relation to career progression routes and opportunities for professional development. Prioritising system innovation, particularly like today, where we'll hear from specialists in their field, we'll look to share best practice, and then we'll celebrate some of the achievements of your practice with the awards ceremony. That's all part of our commitment to both sort of advocating for practitioner registration, but also supporting colleagues to achieve it. Let's just go to what you're going to hear during the programme today, then on the next slide. So as you can see, it's a full programme. There's opportunities for you to participate as well. We'll start with a panel that will have an opportunity to present and then answer your questions in relation to their personal career pathways. We've got a range of speakers in relation to artificial intelligence. We'll start with a panel, and then we've got an excellent keynote speaker with global experience who will share with us her understanding of challenges facing public health in relation to AI. And then we've got a range this afternoon of showcase sessions where you've got the opportunity to join and learn from some of the innovative practice that's been happening across the country. So we'll really be interested to have your feedback on that during the day, and including in that our experience in relation to assessors and portfolio registration. And if we could just go to my last couple of slides then, please. The next one is just a plea. I know sometimes it's easy in a conference, particularly a virtual conference, just to sit back, but please do get involved. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to enter into Q&A. There'll be good opportunity for you to go into sort of a networking session, and look out for other opportunities to contact people and colleagues across the four nations through today, so that you're building that relationship and have got the opportunity to learn and share after the event has finished. So I really hope you enjoy the day. I'll come back to you a little bit later on. If I could go back to my last slide then, please. It just is my final wish to give a big thank you to University of the West of England, who are today's conference sponsor, and to say a huge thank you to you all for participating today, and also for the support that you've given me and the UK PHR over recent years. It's very much appreciated personally, and without our sponsors we would really not be able to put on a virtual conference like this. So again, many thanks to UE Bristol and to colleagues who've supported it to make this happen. Lovely. If I could just go to the next slide, please, because we'll move on to the first panel. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Amy Stimpson, who is our chair for the panel this morning. Amy gained her UK PHR specialist registration in 2020 and her first consultant post in public health in the southwest of England. She's currently the Deputy Director of Health Improvement in the Department of Health and Social Care in the southwest region in England, but is here today as the assistant registrar at the Faculty of Public Health, post that she's held since 2023. I'm really grateful to Amy because she holds a number of UK PHR positions as well. She's a practitioner and specialist verifier and assessor, and she's also a member of our registration appointments committee. She's very busy because she's also an educational supervisor and a professional appraiser. I know that takes quite a bit of work, and as well as working in a variety of leadership roles, Amy has been working in the NHS and the civil service for quite a few years now. Amy's got a particular interest in the topic of our conference, particularly around workforce intelligence standards and policy. So Amy, very warm welcome to you, and I'll hand over the chair and look forward to being part of your panel. Diolch yn fawr.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew, and hopefully you can hear me all okay, and welcome to people who have just joined us. So as Andrew said, I'm here today to chair the session on the public health development and career pathway for the next hour, and I would like to thank UK PHR for the opportunity to chair today's session. As Andrew said, I'm here today in my capacity as the Deputy Registrar of the Faculty of Public Health, and I'm going to start by introducing our panel, fantastic panel from across the UK, and later they'll share with you their presentations about their own individual public health career journeys, which will just show some of the diversity of the experience of all of us working in public health and the different routes people have taken into public health. I think you'll be fascinated by those presentations. You'll see everybody's journey into public health is different, and people will share the advice, the successes, and also some of the challenges. So to start off with, because I'm also conscious of time, a very brief introduction from our panel members before we go into their presentations. So I'm going to start with Xenia. If you're here, if you could just introduce yourself, and then we'll do your presentation later.
Thanks, Amy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Xenia Kumi. I'm a public health registrar based in London.
Thank you. And then Steve Madden.
Good morning, everyone. Steve Madden, Director of Public Health down in Plymouth City Council.
Thank you. Chris.
Morning, everyone. Chris Woodcock, Consultant Public Health at North Tyneside Council.
Thank you. And Andrew, if you just wanted to reintroduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, and I've changed my background. So I'm Andrew Jones. I'm now a consultant advisor to Public Health Wales. I'm formerly the Deputy National Director of Health Protection and Screening Services for that organisation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Very subtle change of background then. I didn't even notice. Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. So just to set the scene before we go into the presentations, as we know, public health is a multidisciplinary profession. We each bring our different backgrounds and experiences into our public health roles. We work in a range of different settings, and we can use that different background and experience in our public health practice. So as you will have gained from the introduction from Andrew, this session really brings together a range of panellists who've worked in a variety of different public health roles, and they are either working with their registration or working towards their registration as well. And people will have come through the portfolio route or the faculty training route as well. So you'll hear from lots of different people, and hopefully that will inspire you for your own public health career journey. And then we will hear how they got into public health, how they knew they wanted, how and when people knew they wanted to become a consultant in public health. People will also be very open with the panel today, and share their challenges from their own public health journey, and also what helped them most. And hopefully this advice will be really helpful for people attending today's conference and embarking on your public health career. We will move into the panel presentations now, and each panellist will speak for up to 8 minutes, and there will be time for discussion and Q&A at the end. So please do use the Q&A function if you're able to do so, and then we will work through as many of those questions as we can after the presentations. So Zena, over to you, and just kick us off, please. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy, and thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. It's great to be part of this panel. So I started training in 2023, and I'm currently on placement with UCL's Institute for Global Health. So if I can have my first slide, please. Great, thank you. So one of the questions that the panel were asked to kind of address in this presentation was what got us interested in public health in the first place. So I'm going to start with a personal story. So this is a photo of my grandfathers. Both of them passed away very suddenly from heart attacks, both on Christmas Eve. So my grandfather Kiri on the left passed away in 1988, and my grandfather Xenis on the right in 2000. They were aged 48 and 54. So obviously very premature deaths. And a question that has kind of haunted our family for many, many years is why? Was it a coincidence? Why was it that they died so suddenly and so at such a young age? So when I started my career in public health, and I started to learn more about what public health is, what public health does, I found that I started to kind of understand actually their deaths a little bit more when I came across the concept of risk factors, health inequalities, and the wider determinants of health. Things started to make a bit more sense. It was almost like kind of the jigsaw puzzle bits kind of coming together. So one of my grandfathers was a refugee from Cyprus. Another experienced kind of abject poverty in early life in Cyprus. They both had kind of shared risk factors like smoking. They probably drank a little bit too much. They both ran fish and chip shops, so they were working till kind of, all hours of the clock into the early hours of the morning. They were both immigrants to the UK in kind of the 60s and 70s. So I would imagine that they probably experienced some kind of discrimination as well. And so just kind of reflecting on that and kind of thinking about the fact that public health is kind of inherently personal and we're all influenced or affected or helped by it in some way. So can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So just a little bit in terms of kind of my path into public health and kind of what I've been doing since. So I apologise for the cheesy emojis and stock art. I think the great thing about public health is that it's a discipline where practitioners come from a really wide range of professional backgrounds, as Amy was saying. There isn't a single way to get into it. And I feel that this also brings a really huge wealth of perspectives to the field, and that's really important. So I studied, I kind of didn't have a medical public health related background. I studied international relations as an undergrad, and I was really set on a career in diplomacy. But when I first graduated, I started working in public affairs and lobbying. And while I quickly realised it wasn't for me, I think it's been really helpful to have that insight into how kind of that lobbying aspect around parliamentarians can help to shape policy, both for the good. So things we've seen recently like the tobacco and vapes bill and, you know, the sugar levy, which has had a huge impact. Also for the bad, like the commercial determinants of health. We see big alcohol, big tobacco, etc. Then I moved into occupational health and safety, and that was actually my into public health. I then landed a public health role in local authority in London, and there I was there for quite a few years, and I worked on lots of different kind of aspects of public health. So workforce health was a huge kind of bit of my portfolio, some mental health, sexual and reproductive health commissioning, and lots of COVID. And during that time, I also did a secondment with the local authorities comms team, which I thought was really useful in terms of understanding that sell-in for public health stories when they're competing with other kind of agendas, other things that kind of the local authority is trying to kind of communicate to stakeholders and the public. The photo in the bottom right is my virtual ceremony for receiving the freedom of the City of London. It was during COVID, so sadly I couldn't attend in person in the beautiful Guildhall, but it was really a kind of a career highlight to date. And during that time in local authority, obviously went through a team restructure. I know that's really, really common in the public sector and in public health. And I just wanted to mention that as well, because restructures are definitely a certainty in kind of the career that we're in. And also during this time, I undertook the UK PHR practitioner registration, and I found that the knowledge workshops in public health and supporting that were really, really valuable. They gave me a really good footing for the masters and further kind of studies and training. So at this point, I was finding out more about the specialty training scheme. I was really inspired by some of the fantastic public health consultants I'd worked with. And obviously we're having trainees come into the team as well for placements. And I also saw some of the huge challenges that were facing public health. So, you know, for example, real lack of trust, I think we saw during COVID within some pockets of society. Issues around public, effective public health communication with the public, widening inequalities that were made worse by the pandemic, climate change, etc., etc., etc. And at this point, I decided to do a master's in public health. I studied at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I did it half-time with work and then with maternity leave in the second year. And then I got onto the training scheme. I started in 2023. Next slide, please. So this is slightly random, but this is a photo. As you can see, Peppa Pig gets a vaccination book. My son picked this out at the library the other week. I promise I had nothing to do with it, but I feel that at the grand old age of 3, he's clearly set on a career in public health as well. Aside from that, it's a great read. I would highly recommend. So just reflecting on some of the challenges. So COVID, even though I was kind of working in a desk-based role, working from home, it was really, really grueling being involved in the public health acute response. And I think for like a very sustained amount of time and trying to kind of support the public and businesses with the kind of constant change. Also feel that public health is, obviously we know it's a very competitive specialty, and it's getting more competitive. It took me a few tries to get onto the training scheme, which I think is quite normal from what I, speaking to others. So I really feel like practice, and just getting really familiar with that kind of application process was really useful. And then also kind of midway through kind of doing my master's and this training, I had a child, and so going through the training and being a working mum and kind of getting through the exams that you need to do when you're on the training scheme, I found that very demanding, but luckily I have a kind of my network, which has really been helpful. In terms of kind of helping to address and overcome some of those challenges, I've felt that it's been really useful to keep the bigger picture in mind, whether that's like professional challenges or personal, just accepting that, even if it's a tricky period, it won't last forever, and actually kind of, thinking about the longer term goal can be really helpful. I've also found such an amazing kind of support network within the public health field. So really amazing colleagues and supervisors. It's a really kind of collegiate discipline, I feel, and that's wonderful. And also just trying to maintain a good work-life balance and making time for exercise really kind of helps me kind of stay grounded. So just to close on kind of advice for anyone thinking about kind of advancing the public health career and getting into specialty training. So I haven't completed my specialty training yet, but I would say follow your passion. All of your past experience, whatever it is valuable to your future career in public health. Expect the unexpected and push yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you for citing us, and be one of our future public health leaders, and enjoy the rest of your training. Thank you for setting the scene. We're now going to go over to Steve for his presentation and journey into public health. Steve, over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. So great to see so many people on the call. I think we've got over like 200 people. This is really fantastic. And I've been scrabbling around in the background to see if our library stock Pepper gets a vaccination, because I need to get my hands on one of those. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name's Steve Madden. I'm the Director of Public Health at Plymouth City Council. So I'm just going to give you a brief history of me and hopefully some advice along the way. If we move to next slide, please. Brilliant. So I think just to kind of pot some of my career history, my career started originally from school. I was working in a hardware store, which seems like the most oddest thing that I would ever do, because I'm the most unhandy person that you would ever meet. But my kind of true health career started working in community pharmacy. So I used to work for Boots the Chemist. I was a pharmacy tech there. During my time at Boots, I think I started to realise that health was more than just medicine, but probably didn't know at the tender age of 19 what public health was. And I bounced around in quite a few roles in a kind of a pre-public health space, which included things like being a medicines management technician in the Welsh NHS. I was a project manager, again in medicines management, but I think my key pivotal role, which introduced me properly into public health, was back in 2009, when I had a really great opportunity to straddle between the medicines management department of the primary care trust at the time and the public health team. And just being in that space really opened my eyes to the world of what public health was. Medicine is very individual focused. Somebody's ill, you give them a medicine and hopefully it makes them better. But I think my experience of working in community pharmacy was I saw a lot of people that had probably what we would describe as lifestyle conditions, which needed more than medicines, or potentially we could have prevented it if them needing medicines if we'd intervened sooner. So it was really during my time working in Bath and North East Somerset that I really got to appreciate what people were doing in the space to keep people healthy and protect their health. It was during that time that the Director of Public Health then said to me that if I wanted to pursue a career in public health, then doing a public health master's was absolutely essential. So I had the pleasure of doing my public health master's part-time whilst working full-time with the University of West of England. Very much of the opinion that if I stayed in public health, great, and if not, a master's in public health would be a great passport to other places. When I joined Baines PCT, or Bath and North East Somerset, I was on a 3-month contract, but just kind of felt that I had made the right decision. And then I ended up staying with Bath and North East Somerset for about 4 or 5 years, which was a really great opportunity. Other roles that I've had in that time was working for Public Health England in the vaccination and screening team, which is again what I'm really interested in, how we get Pepper vaccinated. But also then I had a great opportunity of working for Wiltshire, both as well in multiple roles really. I was the head of health improvement initially whilst doing my public health portfolio. Then I became a consultant back in 2017, and then I had the great honour of becoming a director of public health in 2020. So my interview was in December 2019. We had no idea what was coming, and then I started my job in April 2020, which I've never felt like I needed another grown-up more in my life, but then realised that I was the grown-up and I had to make all the decisions. So I was with Swindon as their Director of Public Health for just over 4 or 5 years, and now I'm currently in the Director of Public Health role in Plymouth City Council, which is an executive role. So on the next slide, I'll just explain a little bit more about the broadness. So public health director roles can be very core to public health, or they can be a little bit broader, or a combination of in between. So down in Plymouth, if we move to the next slide, I'll just give you a bit of a flavour as to what else I'm doing with my time. So within my portfolio down in Plymouth, yes, I'm the Director of Public Health, but I also have leisure services. I also lead on a research collaboration. I have environmental health services, which also includes port health, animal health, taxi licensing, food licensing. I've got civil protection, which is really important for protecting the health of the population in Plymouth. Plymouth is described as a hazard-rich city because we have everything from fuel lines running through the city through to actually nuclear submarines, of which I got to visit a few of those yesterday, which was really eye-opening and incredibly scary in equal measure. And the role of the Director of Public Health has a real fundamental role, should, on the very, very minute chance that something goes wrong, I will be there at the forefront. I've also got libraries, community engagement, which again are really key. They tie in really well with our leisure services. So these are the types of assets that we have across the city to help to improve and maintain people's health and well-being across the city. Community empowerment, bereavement services. So that includes the crematorium and our burial grounds, but also our registration services. So I can truly say that I am involved with every part of a Plymouthian's life, from before conception through to when we pass you on to the next world, which is really exciting for me. But as you can see, there's a real brevity here of what Plymouth thinks the role of the Director of Public Health is, and it's really exciting. And I've got some really phenomenal people to help me to lead in all these spaces. If we move to the next slide for me, please. So what got me interested in public health? So I've kind of already touched on it. So when I was working in community pharmacy, I saw a lot of people that were on a lot of medications. And there's one gentleman that really sticks in my mind because he was on about 18 different medicines. And he was probably on about 8 medicines for his conditions, but he was then on the remaining medications really to treat the side effects of the original medicines. But actually, when you looked at his lifestyle and the complexity of his life, I think looking back now, you could see that if public health had some kind of intervention in some place, we may not have had that gentleman in the position that he's in. I've always been interested in that health space, and it wasn't really until I was working for public health. I wasn't working for Public Health Wales. It didn't necessarily exist then. When I was working for one of the health boards in Wales, I started to get a bit of a flavour for what public health was, and then had the opportunity to combine both my pharmacy training along with my interest in public health when I came into Bath and North East Somerset. There I was working with some really amazing people that showed me what we could do in the space to improve and protect people's health. So I felt very inspired by those individuals. I think we can all probably collectively say nobody leaves school and says, hey, I want to be a public health consultant. But you may leave school with a want and a desire to help people to live happy, healthy lives. And that's really what has inspired me to get into that space today. Next slide for me, please. So when did I know I wanted to become a public health consultant? I'm not sure I ever really knew. When I first came into public health and I saw the director of public health and I saw public health consultants, they felt like these magical, mythical creatures that were doing some really, really important things. But I never felt that this was something that I would be able to achieve or aspire to. During that time, I did do my UK PHR practitioner portfolio, and I think that kind of gave me a bit of a flavour for what would be expected of me if I looked at the specialist portfolio. I'm also really up for the challenge, and I do recall that I did have a public health consultant once tell me that I wouldn't ever be capable of doing the specialist portfolio, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong, and here I am, I did it. So win-win. Don't ever challenge me, because I'm always up for the challenge. So that's really, I would say, probably 2013-14, when I moved into Wiltshire Council. I had a really fantastic public health consultant I was working with, who then went on to be the Director of Public Health, who is now currently the President of the Faculty of Public Health, who always gave me the fire in my belly to go on and inspire and do what I wanted to do, and always encouraged me to push forward. And so without Tracy Daskovich, I don't think I would have submitted my public health portfolio, because what Tracy kept drumming into me is, you are capable, you can do this, you've got the knowledge, you've got the skills, you can do this, and picked me up when I was feeling very frustrated with the portfolio, but also lifted me up into my first consultant role. So I'm truly thankful for Tracy doing that, because I don't think without Tracy's encouragement that I would have pursued becoming a public health consultant. So a big shout out to Tracy there. Next slide, please. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the challenges. So I think doing the public health portfolio is a challenge, and I don't want to put people off it, but you've got to be up for the challenge. For me, trying to do the public health portfolio whilst working full time was challenging. So it included a lot of very early mornings and a lot of very late evenings. It also included me photocopying an insane amount of paper, which luckily we've moved to an electronic portfolio now. So no more culling of trees, which is brilliant. Doing the portfolio full stop is a challenge. You've got to be in it 100%. If you're not sure, wait until you think you know that you're sure, because I think starting it, if you're only half in it, it's going to make it a real challenge for you. Meeting assessors' expectations. I felt very challenged by some of the feedback from my assessors at the time. As somebody that is an assessor now, I also appreciate that I probably make people feel very frustrated with me. But the key thing is that we want to make sure collectively that you are meeting that standard. So I think I see it through different eyes now that I'm on the other side of the portfolio, that the assessors were just trying to do what was right by me and by the public in making sure that I could evidence my knowledge and skills. I put here overcoming the prejudices of non-medic / portfolio route. This is something that I think we're still seeing, and something that I feel like is resurging, which actually worries me. So it's very interesting as the Director of Public Health that people just automatically assume that, one, I'm a doctor, and two, I went through the training program. And I'm not a doctor, and I haven't been through the training program. I went through the portfolio route. And I think this is really important, that we are able to demonstrate that we can be good, effective public health leaders. And that's not to be critical of doctors either. There is a role for all of us in the public health family, but I think we need to be seen that we are, there is a parity between us. So I just really want to keep reinforcing that, because we do need to be challenging the stereotype that doctors are better, that the training route is better. These are equal. We've all got skills that we can bring to the public health family. Other challenges for me, thinking about the jobs I didn't get and the ones that I had to leave to pursue career goals. Everyone in their career journey will always not get a job, and I can think of several that I didn't get. And I look back now and I think, well, actually, if I'd got those, I would have gone in a completely different career direction. But I also appreciate that sometimes you have to leave jobs to make that next step. I had a fantastic time and experience working in Wiltshire. I was there for 7 years, but I had to leave Wiltshire to become a Director of Public Health. And then I had to leave Swindon to broaden my portfolio by coming to Plymouth. Plymouth's my hometown, by the the way. So it means that I get to come home and be really close to my family, which is fantastic. The challenges, public opinion, as you can imagine, Director of Public Health during COVID, not everybody liked public health advice during that time. Not everybody still does. So I think growing a really thick skin is really important, and not taking things personally is really key here. We've obviously moved beyond COVID, but I've just launched a massive new campaign in Plymouth around vaccination, and that is also going to disgruntle a few people, and I'm hopeful that it will ruffle some feathers in a good way. I think true partnership working is a challenge. So sometimes, we're all in it for the greater good, but sometimes egos can get in the way. Organizations and politics can also get in the way sometimes as well. Just remain true to yourself, be evidence-based, and make sure you document everything. In a local authority perspective, you're advising politicians on the decisions that they make, but they make the decision. You're the advisor, they make the decision. And I think if they choose to make a different decision, that's absolutely fine, as long as you're confident in the advice that you gave. Next slide, please. I think this image of Rachel sums it up for me, which is, as I mentioned, when I went into COVID, it was like I walked in on my first day, there was nobody in the office, and someone ran up to me and said, "Do you want to close a care home?" And I thought, can I actually do that? And that kind of constant fear of always needing somebody more adulty than yourself is a real challenge, until you realize as a consultant or a director of public health that you are the adult and people are coming to you for the advice. And that imposter syndrome is always going to be with you, but you just have to ride that wave. The key thing, I think, for me, what has helped across the years is having good mentors and coaches, be that official ones or unofficial ones. Undertaking action learning sets with similar minded people is really helpful. Having peers that you can trust, but also, as our previous speaker said, actually just having a family network around you to be able to support you through your career is really important. Experience does help. You do feel you will find your tribe, and you will get comfortable in your own skin with the more time that you spend in your careers. And ultimately, I think it's a Spanish saying, but I don't know what the Spanish is, which is about starting the day by eating a frog, which is basically do the most difficult thing first. And I think for me, that's always a really key piece of advice, which is just do the hard things. And I think doing your portfolio or pursuing more senior public health roles is definitely trying to eat a frog. And the only way through is through. So I would say that focus on getting through it is really key. My key advice then, I think, to finish up is say yes to opportunities. That's the key thing that I've done. I think sometimes just seize the opportunity when people are offering you that, whatever it is, say yes. Make sure you learn, reflect, adapt, and strive to always be the better yourself. Use the knowledge, skills, and expertise around you. Don't feel threatened by people that are better at doing other things than you. Harness their skills. I'm all up for, I don't really like playing with numbers, but I know there's people in my team that do, so I use those skills. I'm a storyteller. They can use those skills. It's okay to say, I don't know enough about that to have an opinion, and I think that applies in both your professional and your personal lives. We're in a very tense global space at the moment, and I think everybody has an opinion about something, and sometimes it's okay to not have an opinion or not know enough about it. Work-life balance is essential. Protect your boundaries. You are going to do people no favors if you're not putting on your own life jacket first. Again, another really key tip from Tracy is you've got to look after yourself before you can look after others. So keep your boundaries. Bit of friendliness goes a long way. For me, making friends and influencing people. You do nice things for me, I'll do nice things for you. So I think we're all working towards common goals. That's key. Be kind to yourself. As I said, always put on your own life jacket first. Build a network of allies. Who can you reach out to when times are hard? And please don't take things personally. We're in a professional space, and it's sometimes really difficult not to be emotional about things or how people interact with you. But the key thing is that we're all here to do a job. So, leave it at the office or leave it wherever your work is. Don't take it home with you. this is where we'll leave it. So the success is, this is what people think it looks like. It looks like a long linear line that you start in at point A and you go into point B, and it's all wonderful. I think that slide really sums up that squiggly line is really what success looks like, because it's the learning, it's the not learning, it's the jobs you got, it's the jobs you didn't get that will then eventually get you to where you want to go. But the key thing is in spite of the chaos, keep going. The only way is through. So I'll stop there, Amy. I won't share my last slide. I'll come back to you. Thank you.
People joining the call today, please do use the chat function, the Q&A function rather, for your questions. We've got our first question that will come to you later on. We've now heard from the Southwest and London. We are now going to move up the country, and we're going to go to Chris for his presentation. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all. So yes, firstly, hello everyone. I'm Chris Woodcock. I work North Tyneside Council, which is in the northeast of England, and this will just be a little bit of my career journey and experience through UK PHR. So next slide, please. So admittedly, there'll be some text-heavy slides here, but when I was little, I didn't really have a huge amount of clarity over what I wanted to do growing up, but what I wanted to do was work either in a nice office or wear a tracksuit all day, and I've yet to wear a tracksuit all day professionally, and I've had mixed results with nice offices. So nevertheless, I'll take you through this and show you some of the better and less glamorous establishments I've worked in. So as we've already heard today, people enter public health from different spheres. I was no different, so I worked in the private sector. My background was in business and management. I started in a primary care trust in 2009 as a public health social marketing manager, admittedly at the time with little knowledge of either what a primary care trust was or indeed public health. But as I did kind of learn, progress, work there for a period of time, I became fascinated, and I know everyone on this call will already kind of have a bit of that, or a lot of that kind of passion, and it really started to kind of make sense, understanding the kind of the complexity of people's lives, the independencies of people's lives, the opportunity to kind of make a difference. County Durham at that time as a PCT was a massive one, so it was a huge team, so there was a lot of people to kind of learn from. There was already the kind of consultants who sat in a different wing, such was their gravitas in the building at the time. But also I guess I could see different people within the team doing different qualifications. I think I became aware of the kind of the Masters in Public Health, which I began in 2012. We've already heard from Steve, that was part-time, that was a challenge, but hey, it was also funded, so I can't pretend you don't look a gift horse in the mouth, and actually if you want something, you're going to have to work for it at some point. So again, they were the opportunities, and also I guess a very early kind of indicator of how much you could progress within the field, but also how organisations would invest in you as well, actually, if you were that kind of person and you were keen and you were willing to put your hand up. So absolutely, that kind of began the journey. I worked through the implications of the Health and Social Care Act and the land use reforms, and as we moved into local authority land, and that's a picture on the right, which is Durham County Council's County Hall, which is a truly foul building that will remain that way for forever, because they can't afford to remove it, such as its asbestos. But nevertheless, so that was kind of their first real exposure to local authority, and actually beginning to understand exactly why public health had been moved back into local authority. And again, that was exciting, and the volume of opportunities and the different colleagues and departments and kind of reach, it was fascinating. Began the practitioner registration scheme, because it was seen as absolutely as a way of kind of validating your experience, and particularly when we moved into a different setting, it was a way of kind of highlighting our skill set. So I was one of the first in the Northeast cohort that did that many moons ago now. Completed that in 2014 along with my MPH at the time, so it was a very busy time of additional studies and kind of just lots of writing, lots of typing. But absolutely got in your kind of the mindset of collating evidence of how to compile portfolios of understanding competencies actually, and I think that became a really core thing for the kind of my career as it progressed. I guess even understanding that back then and past the time the MPH, but kind of began to realise there was always more you could learn, always more you could develop, and that's always been a driver for me as well within public health. There's always the opportunity to kind of learn and more and progress. So I did additional modules outside of what had been covered in my own MPH kind of year on year, just to continue to expand my knowledge, which turns out would be very helpful as time progressed. Next slide, please. So after that, I then moved into another authority, which was South Tyneside College, or council even, on one on the left, which was a very grand old building because it was it's on the Tyne, so it was old kind of shipbuilding heritage. It was marvellous. That was the kind of first time I'd had real senior level working experience. I was line managed by the DPH, which I've already heard of, touched on today. The organisation team had been through a restructure, so it was a brand new time. There was lots of development with kind of teams and portfolios and experiences, but again, continued to kind of learn where I could, again, do additional studies where practical. There was another reorganisation, and I was then back in Durham County Council, which again, back in from what was beautiful grand offices to less so. But yeah, it was again a senior level member of the team. I'd definitely become aware of the registration by portfolio. I had an excellent consultant at the time who was really pushing and encouraging and saying, based on kind of my work thus far, there were opportunities there. I had a kind of a raft of experience and knowledge that could be of use. As it was the first time I really kind of got the competencies out and began to map my own progress, and kind of understand where I was at against different criteria, what I'd achieved, what I still needed to develop, what I could improve upon. And for me, that became perfect for all kind of conversations around CPD and PDP, and it was so much more enriching, and I encourage colleagues to do that wherever they're kind of at within their career, to have a conversation about I would like to do this kind of work, I would like to work on this program, I would like to develop my skills in this area, instead of just saying I want to progress, because you realise when you become line managers, just somebody wanting to progress is difficult to understand what they need to do to get there. So it became a really helpful tool that I could continue work with my CPHs and DPHs at the time to say I'd like to do this and that, and often, granted, that would come on top of my current portfolio of work, but again, these are the things that I guess I realised I had to do if I wanted to kind of continue my journey. Next slide, please. So after a couple of years of doing that, I guess Durham Council as a touched on, I think it's the sixth biggest in the country, so it's a huge council, huge directorate. There was some kind of different levels of experience and exposure I needed, so I moved to another authority, slightly smaller one. At the time, it didn't have a consultant in public health, so I directly kind of answered into the DPH, but it gave me the opportunity to work at kind of a very senior level, to have member exposure, to have senior exec exposure, and kind of, yeah, just to kind of elevate often my common practice and skills, but within that environment. We've already heard that, and we can tell by the timelines, that was peak COVID, so it was straight into kind of, yeah, many of us lived through it, and setting up testing regimes and contact testing regimes, and what happened in schools and what we would do with care homes. But it was, yeah, really beneficial at that time to kind of work in that area, and it's a splendid office, so I was happy with that. I began to kind of explore mentors, had a period of kind of getting different local DPHs just to help kind of progress me through the latter parts of my portfolio, where I couldn't see how I could get certain kind of experience or where that kind of program of work would be that I could work upon. But again, that was really helpful, and that kind of progressed me through to I got to a stage in end of 2021 where I was able to complete the pre-application and progress through into kind of production of the full portfolio by January 23. Again, it's been touched on, but it's not to underestimate the work that needs to go into the production of such a thing. There's the development and skills and experience and knowledge that you need to be applicable, but the actual production can be a challenge in itself, but a very worthwhile one. So yeah, then achieved specialist registration, became a consultant at the turn of 2024, and then deputy director of public health by April 24. And I guess the next bit is, because when I produced these slides, it wasn't confirmed yet, but we'll shortly be Director of Public Health in Hartlepool Borough Council by the end of this month. So yeah, it's been a kind of a full journey for me, from being a random practitioner who accidentally ended up working in a public health department to thoroughly valuing, relishing, and kind of loving almost every day in public health. So next slide, please. So my kind of reflections, probably not too dissimilar, but it is absolutely, as we all know, a very rewarding profession. With a career pathway, you can kind of, if that is something you're inclined to do, you can see your kind of the things that you may need to do to progress. As I've touched on, absolutely consideration of skills and competencies, no matter kind of where you're at that point in your career, it'll help you progress, and or it'll make you a better practitioner. And I often kind of promote that to anybody locally, regionally, about that actually this is a mechanism can only improve our workforce, and I'm a firm believer in that. Work with your colleagues, work with your team to kind of focus on what it is that you might need to do. There's a bit of kind of being brave, work on lots of different agendas, try different roles, departments, organisations. For those of you who know what the training programme looks like, it absolutely delivers that. If you're considering a portfolio approach, you might have to do that kind of yourself with support, but absolutely kind of be brave, and you will benefit from seeing how different organisations and teams operated. Be committed to your profession. I guess, as obvious as it may seem, is no one's going to do this for you. It's hard, and it should be. It absolutely should be, because we should be trusted to deliver, to protect the public's health. But yeah, that's not going to come easily. And I often say to people, as I've heard, for your portfolio, and this will resonate with assessors, it's not about how good you are or how good you'll be. It is what you have done. And if you can't show that you've done it, then it's tricky for purposes of portfolios. But that's absolutely your kind of mindset of how do I do these things. And once you're into that kind of mindset, then go and do it. That is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, and congratulations on your new role, Chris. That's great. I'm going to hand over to Andrew now, and we'll take Andrew's presentation and have some time for some questions. I just need to check what time we're due to finish, because we started late. So if someone could let me know, that would be great. Over to Andrew first.
That's great. I'll just make sure I try and stick to a shortened time, if that'll help. Again, thanks for this invitation. People may or may not know I was the first ever specialist registrant of UKPHR back in 2003. Something that the CMO, Dr. Ruth Hall, told me at the time would never leave me. She was very true. And I bear the number FR0100, such is our registration practice. I always wanted to be 007, but never mind. We didn't give anybody that opportunity. Just in contrast to other colleagues, you'll guess from what I said at the beginning, is that I'm coming to the end of my fantastic career in public health, and just want to share some of that with you, because it is a journey. And if I can go to my next slide, I've only got one slide. I thought I'd just talk to you and show my own career journey, and a little bit of a read plug at the end. Is that, you know, I've worked through from being a practitioner to being an executive director at a national level, and all that's in between. At the same time, and I wanted to start with this really because you are who you are, and running alongside your professional career will be the rest of your life and you. And during that whole period, I've been a son, a brother, a husband, partner, a father, and I'm now using those skills to be a grandfather. So, you know, life is rich. And a career pathway is rich also. I'm not unlike anybody else. I started at a young age wondering what I was going to do. My two best friends, we still wonder how we ended up where we ended up now. But I ended up, perhaps for some obvious reasons, going into environmental health. My father was a meat inspector. My grandfather was a builder. My other grandfather was a door-to-door clothes salesman. So we were very sort of practically orientated. And my first ever job in public health that I'm still very proud of, and I'm not sure what the name is now for local government colleagues, but I was a street sweeper. I had a brush and I worked that job for 3 months, and it gave me fantastic community insight. as well as sort of being environmentally focused. But it really gave me a chance to walk some of the streets of Cardiff and understand, everyday life in a cosmopolitan city. So even back in those days, in the mid '80s, it gave me a real rich understanding of life, if you like. So I started in environmental health, and my first, I suppose, understanding of public health was obviously during that degree, but I particularly got interested in epidemiology. Was very fortunate to be partnered, which is one of my themes, with an excellent mentor who was actually the Welsh Government statistician at the time. And I was able to do work on inequalities in health, some very early work in those days of looking at standardised mortality ratios in the Welsh, or in one of the Welsh valleys. That really opened my eyes to a bit broader than sort of environmental health day-to-day practice. Nevertheless, I put that to one side and went out to become an environmental health officer in a Welsh local authority, and again had some fantastic opportunities of one, studying a master's in public health. So somebody saw my potential, suggested that I do that. And a couple of things happened at that point, I suppose. I was working quite closely then with consultants and a director of public health, and also consultants in microbiology, because of some of my day-to-day work on food quality and water quality. And because of that, I was lead investigator on a food poisoning case that turned out to be the first time we ever identified E. coli 0157, which is a particularly nasty gastrointestinal infection in the UK in a food product. So that then introduced me to the academic part as well as the investigation part of public health. And I published an article which again was brand new to me. As a practicing environmental health officer. So I guess I always had a knowledge of public health, but my real introduction to public health then came from a really focused opportunity and the backing of a medical DPH who took me on as a joint appointment at the same time as I was given the role of advising the Welsh Local Government Association on sort of broader health policy because of my master's background. So I worked in a joint role there, and it happened to coincide with the introduction of the first portfolio registration. So a bit like other colleagues, I had a mentor who backed me, both one who supported me as a director of public health, but also a chief environmental health officer who actually let me go because I was quite a valuable asset at the time. But that's what you need, is leaders who are able to see potential and release it. Not keep it to themselves. So that was a fantastic experience. Enabled me then to do a lot more needs assessment work because I really discovered I loved epidemiology, but also to take on some community leadership roles. And I became the lead for the county, not just the district, in relation to substance misuse, which got me working very close to some very vulnerable people and communities. So it was actually during that joint appointment that I suddenly realised, okay, I've got some career choices to make. At the time, I was on secondment in the Welsh Local Government Association, working with the then head of social affairs, who went on to become one of the first cabinet ministers in what is now the Welsh Government. So in the Welsh Assembly in 1999, Jane Davidson. I was working with Jane, and Jane went actually then to get elected, and it was a fairly good suggestion for me to go to become head of social affairs, but I saw the public health portfolio. A bit like Steve, I thought I could do that. I was back to do it, and so I chose not to go for the head of social affairs job, and I put my portfolio application in instead. I still meet with the little team that supported me to do that back in Gwent Health Authority back in the early 2000s. We go for Christmas dinner every. They all still remember the boxes of paper that they helped me carry around, and it's still a joke to this day. But that's when I sort of first discovered that I wanted to be a consultant. I then, as you can see from my career, I got appointed as a consultant. And just Steve's mentioned it as well, but I had to move for that. They don't always land on your doorstep. So I moved from South Wales to North Wales, uprooted my family in order to do that. But it was the right thing to do. And again, I found some excellent mentors then once I got into the consultant role. I won't repeat what Steve said, but my experience was the same. You know, you suddenly realise your first 2 years of practice, you are the adult. But there are still mentors around you, but you do have to make the decisions. But you know, to this day, I still take counsel from people. But what you do become responsible. So just be aware of that. Events always shape a career as well. I didn't set out to do any of this particularly, but events take their course. And the regional director at the time then was unwell, and I was asked to step into that position in 2007, just as bird flu hit the UK. It started in Wales in a small farm community, and I suddenly found myself on the BBC every morning at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock on the early morning news because we had COBRA and cabinet meetings because we didn't know where it was going. It didn't materialise that it happened, and the next flu pandemic didn't come until 2009. But certainly my actions and what colleagues said is about what you do. My actions in that position and in that role enabled me to get the regional director position substantively. And then to move from that into becoming the National Director of Health Improvement, which again was my way of wanting to make sure I broaden my portfolio to specialise in certain areas. I think other colleagues mentioned, reorganisations, and they always happen. And that was the point that, again, I decided to take a step into NHS executive leadership by becoming the executive director in the largest health board in Wales. That isn't just a public health job. So, colleagues need to be aware of that. A bit like Steve's broad portfolio, that carries a very broad corporate portfolio. And I found myself responsible for a whole range of things as well as public health. But what I used that to do was to really focus on the healthcare quality side of public health practice, as well as being the general leader for the system. I moved then finally back into the national role as back into my roots, if you like, as a director of health protection and microbiology. I never thought I'd find myself leading a medical discipline, not a public health discipline, but microbiology is a purely medical discipline. It employs doctors. There's no multidisciplinary consultants in microbiology, although we're working very hard now to get healthcare scientists at a consultant level, a bit similar to public health. And thoroughly enjoyed working alongside and being educated by medical peers. And then I finally, as you can see at the bottom, took the Deputy National Director role across a broader portfolio again. And I was the executive lead during COVID for part of that, which was a truly challenging experience. We were asked to just touch on some other things. I wanted to not repeat what some colleagues had said, but I had similar things to Steve in relation to barriers. I think the very early days of multidisciplinary practice, particularly when there weren't many registered through the portfolio route, was quite a challenge, and the training programme wasn't multidisciplinary at that point. So there were very, very few of us. And that was a bit of a challenge. And I've seen some of that reappearing as well. So I want to advocate for ongoing multidisciplinary practice. My take on it is that, there are a few colleagues who still think that a medical background carries more benefits than other backgrounds, but I think that's a minority. But really, we do really need to focus on the richness of multidisciplinary leadership practice. And again, I won't repeat what Steve said, but the first part of practice, the first couple of years in a consultant role, you really are learning to be the leader. But you mustn't, shy away from those difficult decisions. The other thing that's been really challenging, and I'm still trying to advocate for now, is it's so important to be able to communicate with your population in their first language. And Welsh wasn't my first language, but I've learned Welsh in order to be able to communicate properly with the population. And I'm troubled a little bit in Wales because we're not appointing many first language Welsh speakers or people learning Welsh to senior leadership roles. And that's a real communication problem. And that showed in COVID, where we didn't have a strength in depth of an ability to communicate complex messages in a very simple way. So that's part of my next journey, is to try to make sure that we find a way of appropriately doing that. I've mentioned mentors, and I've had them throughout my career. I won't name them all, but I think the point is you need mentors on the whole journey, not just at the start. And I still have mentors now that have helped me into retirement decisions, which is really, really important. And if you do take a leadership role, I really do think, and my colleagues have sort of advocated the same, is you need to challenge yourself to move around the disciplines. Public health is a very broad discipline, and if you truly want to be a leader, then you need to gain experience, proper experience in the various aspects, which is what you do from different jobs and different opportunities. My final bit then, in just providing some advice, I wanted to just provide perhaps some different advice because I'm at the end of my career, but also I'm the chair of UKPHR, and that's a label I'm also really proud of. And I've gone on a journey for that. So, I used to be an assessor and a verifier. I used to be a member of the Registration Approval Committee. I then became a member of the board, and I then became a chair. So there are opportunities there for colleagues to support the regulator because it is all voluntary. There's no, other than a very small paid staff, it's all voluntary, and I'm really grateful for everybody who does. We've heard a lot about specialist portfolio today, and I just want to broaden it in my advice to people, which is right at the start. I think public health practitioner registration is really important. I've heard colleagues say how they did it on their journey. That is so important, but it's so important if you're not going to make that journey. It's a real badge of excellence. It speaks to your commitment, and it speaks to the standards of the profession. So I maintained my practitioner registration with Chartered Institute of Environmental Health till the day I retired. I was duly registered because I felt that was really important to celebrate my practitioner status, but also celebrate my specialist status. Therefore, we respect every level of public health, and we're trying to grow the career journey pathway, yes, from the bottom of the top, but also to each of the levels. And my advice is we respect all levels of public health practice, all levels of skill. We're multidisciplinary teams. Not everybody's going to be the leader, but everybody can lead and everybody can participate. So I want us to respect every level of public health, underpinned with practitioner registration. Have no doubt then the specialist level is challenging to achieve, and it should be. It remains equivalent to medical consultant practice, and the training that medical colleagues go through to get to that level of knowledge and skill. Okay, and when we go to see a doctor of a particular specialism for ourselves or a family member or a child, you're expecting a level of knowledge and skill, and that has been hard earned. In the same way as a medic practicing public health, therefore the standard is high, achieving it is difficult, and that's what we should expect. The last thing then, in saying that leadership's not for everybody, I truly respect all layers of practitioner practice. If you do think you want to go on the specialist journey, don't rush. I think colleagues said the same. Take your time, do it when you're ready, because arriving anywhere too soon can be not good for you as well as an opportunity. So, if you're going to take that journey, just be aware of it. And then finally, when you reach whatever part of your career you're happy with, make sure you enjoy it all the way along. I've thoroughly enjoyed my career. That is what is important. Don't do anything unless you're happy. And my own reflection, having recently finished and just moved back on a part-time basis to a non-leadership role, is all roles are fulfilling and they finish really soon. So, I've just talked to you about 40 years of practice that's gone like that. So enjoy your career wherever it is, and thank you for listening. Diolch yn fawr, Amy.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our panel members. We've got a few minutes for questions, but before we do that, just say thank you for the presentations. Thank you for sharing your own individual experiences, the good, the bad and the ugly, shall we say. There's some great advice in there from colleagues, and it just shows the breadth of public health, and there's no single route or right route into public health. Andrew really nicely summarised some of the themes, and I think public health is the best job in the world, is what we will conclude from that as well. So in terms of some of the questions, we won't have time for all of them, but Steve, I'm going to come to you first, because I think Denise's question around public health in Scotland has sort of been addressed through Andrew's presentation. So Steve, there's a question for you, which is, if you're scared of maths, how challenging did you find the Masters in Public Health, and how did you develop those skills needed? I'm particularly dealing with big data sets.
I'm less scared now than I was. But for me, I had done a previous bachelor's. So when I went to do my master's, I was 25 with no previous university experience. The university, firstly, were incredibly helpful and supportive as adult learners, as you would expect them to be, but also peers that have a better grasp of numbers, latching on to them is really helpful. Numbers are important, so don't get me wrong. I don't want you to your takeaway message to be the Director of Public Health says he hates numbers. Numbers are really important because they help us to evidence things. The stories are also important as well. The insight and the intelligence is really important to help us demonstrate outcomes. For me, it has been to just push myself. Not just in relation to numbers, but other areas that I necessarily didn't feel that comfortable in. Health protection was another one. I was much more a health improvement kind of person. You have to push yourself into those spaces. There is a lot of literature out there, and there's lots of YouTube tutorials and podcasts and people around you that you can have those conversations with. You know, I'm very fortunate that I've got some great boffins and geeks in my team that really love numbers and will really be delighted to explain the numbers to me. Ultimately, I'm the one sat in the room trying to explain them to others, so getting my head around that is really important. But again, look at your weak areas and look at what you need to do to develop yourself in that space, but also rely on the skills of others as well.
I think that's great advice. Thank you, Steve. And just one for you, Chris. You talked about the office environments. So what makes a great office for you, just briefly? It's one of the questions in the chat. Yeah, lots of efforts on healthy workplaces. What did your favourite one have?
Yeah, I think it's probably a cliche, but it's the team. And I know it's been touched on previously, but there's often such a wealth of diversity and experience. And I always tell, I'm an education supervisor, and I always tell any registrars as well, just kind of don't underestimate or ask your colleagues. There's so much knowledge that exists around this team or director or organisation, whatever it may be. So yeah, they're your peers, and I know we've all kind of reiterated how important and rewarding that absolutely the job is, and how we work for our residents and our communities. But again, I think it's okay to enjoy where you sit in your desk, in your office, and your colleagues, because they can get you through some tricky times as well. So yeah, I would always say it's who you work with. I was obviously slightly tongue-in-cheek about the glamour of some of the buildings I've occupied in my career, but yeah, it's always the people.
I think that's a great way to end, and I think that really resonates with what Steve was saying in terms of the maths question, isn't it? It's about the team, it's about using your colleagues, knowing people's strengths and knowing your own weaknesses as well and working on those. So Helen has popped in the chat that we will respond individually to the questions.
Yes.
Once again, thank you to our panel members and great advice and experiences. I'm now going to hand back over to Helen.
Chris and all, welcome back. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Charlotte Refson. Charlotte's a trained physician and an expert in health policy. Her work focuses on harnessing the power of AI and other technology to drive prevention, create sustainable health systems, and achieve health for all. I know that Charlotte's been working closely alongside Sir Patrick Vallance, who colleagues will remember as the Chief Scientist to Government during COVID, and Sir John Bell, and her thought leadership contributes significantly to policy discussion on social care policy, biotechnology and healthcare in the AI era. So over her career, Charlotte's worked in over 25 countries to support the transformation of health and systems globally. And I know most recently, Charlotte, you were speaking in the NHS Conf conference as part of a peer AI group in Manchester. So we're really grateful for your time this morning. And let me hand the floor to you. Welcome.
So, apologies for that, and hello everybody. I'm Charlotte Refson. I'm Director of Health Policy at the Tony Blair Institute. I have been here for about 2 years now. Prior to that, I started out as a GP in South East London. I then went to go and work for a consultancy, KPMG, for 6 years, where I worked in their global health team and had the opportunity to see health systems across the world before I came here. And I thought in the time that we have together, I would tell you a little bit about the Institute and a little bit about some of the work that we have been doing with countries and some of the insights that we're gaining from countries around the world about what healthcare and particularly prevention looks like in this new kind of AI era. And then I thought I could give you sort of 10 minutes at the end to ask any questions. The first thing I thought I would just talk a little bit about the Institute, because it can look a bit opaque to people from the outside who don't know what the Tony Blair Institute is or what we do. And I guess just to say, we're global. We work in about 45 different countries. And in each of those countries, we consult governments. And it could be on a range of functions. It could be health, economics, climate, whatever. And the countries that we tend to operate in are low and middle income countries, although we do have some offices in North America and Singapore, for example. But most of the countries that we work in are low and middle income countries, and we're a not-for-profit. So I think that's important to say as well. I sit in a part of the business that does a lot of our research and thought leadership. So we publish a lot of policy papers talking about what governments should be thinking about, and we focus a lot on technology. And I think there is this, it's quite a sort of conviction of the Institute really that we're going through a new type of industrial revolution, and that the way in which governments and countries embrace that will determine outcomes for people, and that a lot of what we put out is about trying to align the interests of the public with what we're able to achieve with technology. So that's a really big focus of what we do. I also thought it would be interesting to share with you just some insights that sort of Tony brings back from some of these countries, and it's about the sort of the urgency with which we are writing about some of this stuff, and a theme that comes up consistently across countries. And I know we have this problem in the UK, but it's not just in the UK, is this issue of populism. And it might seem a slightly strange topic to talk about, but it is relevant, because I think across the world, what we are seeing is that increasingly populations are paying high taxes and getting quite poor public services. And that sounds very familiar to you people in the UK, but it's a familiar story the world over. And I think that, what Tony has noticed, or what he comes back and says, is that increasingly people are turning to populists because they offer sort of easy solutions. And the populations, they're not really entirely sure what they want. They just know they want something different. And in a sense, they're kind of just ready to burn the barn down. They don't really know what's on the other side. They just know they don't like the status quo. And that's the point at which Tony turns to us as the sort of directors of policy, said that it's incumbent on you then, as progressives or whatever you think you are, to give something fundamentally different, to offer something fundamentally different, not just to offer really small increments on the status quo, but to present a new offer, whether that's in health or education or whatever it is. And for Tony, for the Institute, that new offer really is about prevention, and it's leaning into some of the opportunities that we have with data, AI and technologies to really lead into prevention. So that just sort of gives you a bit of a backdrop for why we are thinking about the things that we are. I also thought it might be interesting to sort of play back some of the changes that we're going to need to see in health systems of the future. Because I think that if we spend our time, we just had the publication of the 10-year plan and the life sciences strategy and all of this, but if we spend our time trying to build what would have been a great health system in the 1990s, we'll have missed the point. But we're trying to build a health system for the future. And I think that some of these technologies are changing some of the characteristics or the features that we need to see in our health systems. So one example I give of that is this fragmentation. So I think that actually AI might lead to fragmentation of health systems rather than integration, or at least there's a need for integration because of the fragmentation. And I say that because AI is starting to erode the asymmetry of information that underpins our profession, that underpins all professions, frankly, as an asymmetry of information. But if that information is more freely and easily and cheaply available on the internet or through ChatGPT, then increasingly people will start to look outside the NHS for their health needs. And increasingly they are, by the way. So if you look at young people who visited a GP in the last year, 18 to 24-year-olds, 45% of them saw a private GP. Increasingly, people in their middle age are taking out private health insurance, and people of older age are paying out of pockets for hips, knees and cataracts. So increasingly people are starting to use non-NHS services, and I think it's really important to have some sort of function that can unify all of these, particularly the records, so that all of these sit in one place. And the idea that your GP record will be your the core place where all of this information is, the fulcrum of it all, I think will no longer be the case in future. And it's why we make the case for, one of the reasons we make a case for a digital health record. Another kind of aspect of AI that I think is interesting, that means we need something slightly different in the health system, is the ability to predict, the ability to take to understand risk, or to take data from different parts of your life and to really understand what you're at risk of. And then you can start to turn that into prevention. Another area is AI will increasingly allow people more agency in how they access their care. How can we turn that into empowerment? AI will enable us to deal with more complexity, but how do we turn that complexity into personalisation? AI will generate a pace of innovation that we haven't seen before. Now it's GLP-1s, next it'll be cancer vaccines. These things will continue to emerge. How do we make sure that our health system is agile enough to adopt them and to deliver them? And then finally, there's a point about risk exposure, and I think this is really, really important, because AI will start to expose your risk from a much earlier age. And we're about to move into a time where, especially if we start genoming babies from birth, where almost from the moment you're born, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what you're going to die of and when. And if you lived in a health system that didn't have a socialised health insurance system, that had a private health insurance system, that would make a lot of people instantly uninsurable because they have prior conditions. And so I feel like we've never needed a nationalised health insurance system more. And when we go out and talk to countries that are about embracing technology and embracing AI, we talk about the need to secure people's risk. So I think AI is there are all these different characteristics that have the power to deliver such huge change, but the health system needs to adapt to be able to deliver that on that change. This code. Right. So this one is just to sort of say that to point out that discrepancy between demand and supply, really, and to say that it's fairly obvious that in all of these countries, they all face high demand for services and limited capacity. And demand is only sort of expanding. It will continue to expand as the pace of innovation expands, with climate change, with antimicrobial resistance, that the increased risk of communicable disease, even this drive towards universal health coverage that we're seeing across the world, will increase paid for demand. And on the other side, we've got these limiting capacity factors, like don't have enough workforce, don't have enough funding, don't have the right digital infrastructure. And so it's really clear, because of the demand challenges, that we need prevention, and it's really clear from the supply challenges that we need productivity. And I want to talk a bit today, I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but I was going to talk a little bit about how AI can be part of the solution. Trying to go to the next slide. So this is just a sort of brief overview of ways in which AI is already starting to deliver on both prevention and productivity, all the way from kind of, at a national level, being able to do disease surveillance, contact tracing, public health messaging, at a kind of regional level, being able to deliver on things like population health management, at a hospital level, being able to drive operational efficiency within the organisation, at a GP level or primary care level, being able to power the management of non-communicable diseases, and even at an individual level, being able to support people to manage their own health through digital apps. This is over 2 slides, by the way. I just want to talk briefly about some of these things that we are noticing that countries are doing to A, stimulate, B, regulate, and then C, assimilate some of these new technologies. So, for example, at the heart of it all sits data, because AI is what is the substrate. Data is the substrate of AI. So a lot of countries across the world are moving towards having a digital ID, a digital health record attached to it, and then being able to share that with across providers. So we give the example of Estonia, where 98% of people have an ID card, 100% have an electronic health record, 20% have their genome mapped, and by the way, they've paid 1% of their GDP to pay for all of that. We talk about in the States having open standards, data governance, stakeholder collaboration. I'm not saying it's perfect there, I'm just giving sort of examples of where they have moved towards legislating for data sharing and interoperability. On the innovation support, I mentioned China, purely because the level of funding that is going into innovation and AI innovation in health in China is staggering. There's a public funding, but there's a national technology innovation program called the Little Giants program. That's not exclusively for medicine. There's 256 billion they have put into R&D for AI. They've created 2 or 3 new stock exchanges for this type of tech, and a lot of this money is literally just subsidizing the development of this technology. They're not even looking for a return on investment. So countries are putting their lot in on investing in AI. But obviously with that comes this the need to regulate, and obviously with all medical devices you're thinking about safety and effectiveness, but I think the other aspects of this with AI are around ethics and bias, and also privacy, security and trust. So there's thinking about how you move from a kind of siloed regulation of all of these different aspects, but having a more pragmatic approach where you kind of chart a pragmatic course through all of these different areas of regulation that you're trying to optimize. You just go on to the next slide. And then finally, there's this idea, how do you assimilate it? We've got a real problem with tech adoption and spread. And it seems to me that there are sort of different approaches to that. You can do the top down, imposing some of this technology, but there's also a bottom up approach that I think is just as important. So for South Korea, I give as a good example for a top down approach, where they have an organization called KAIDI, which is dedicated to promoting and supporting the development of particularly AI in healthcare. But then if you're thinking about primary care, for example, I think there really is a role for to drive the adoption of innovation, is that choice and agency. And so there's a sort of top down and a bottom up approach, being able to ensuring that your workforce is agile enough to adapt to these new technologies, that your primary care structure is there to deliver your prevention work. And then finally, this risk pooling function, which we've sort of talked about before, but it's this idea of, alongside the AI, making sure that you're protecting people's risk. So I'm going to briefly talk about some of these papers that we have done recently. They cover a lot about tech, but a lot about prevention and new models of prevention in the kind of AI era. We published a paper about 18 months ago on digital health records. It's since become this single patient record. It's become government policy. And the idea behind it was preparing the NHS for the AI era, preparing it so that all of the information about a person is stored around the person, and that it would be available. Now, it might be nominally in one place, or it might actually be in one place, or it might be nominally in one place, and that you just go and collect that data and gather it as and when you need it. So it could be a federated system, but essentially that it's linked at a person level, and that once you understand risk properly and comprehensively, that you can start to share that risk information with 3 people that can do something about it and can prevent it. So you can share that risk with the patient through a patient portal like the NHS app, who can then manage their health better. You can share that risk with a provider like a GP who can manage that patient better, and you can share that information with an insurer. And I use that word advisedly because I know it generates antibodies in the UK, but the NHS is an insurer. It's we don't like to think about it that way, but it is. And data is what helps us to determine the risk profile of your population and how you're going to spend a fixed budget and allocate that funding between the north and the south, the rich and the poor, the acute versus prevention and long-term prevention. So data is at the heart of the decisions that the NHS should be making about how it spends its money as a sort of payer. The next, this one was, we wrote a big paper about the app. I guess, so this would be, on that diagram previously, the sort of patient lens onto their own data. And where we see the NHS app is not just as a kind of, it's not just an app. I mean, calling it just an app would be like saying that Amazon is just an app. I mean, sure, Amazon has an app, but Amazon is a multi-billion-dollar global logistics company. And sitting behind the NHS app is a health service for however many millions of people. So kind of, yes, it is an app, but also it is just a different way of interacting with a health service. And our message for this was that it needs to be consumer driven, like all apps are. It needs to be, and I know we don't like that word in the NHS a lot either, consumer, but for people to engage with it and for people to really use it, it needs to have a retail offer like any other app would have. It needs to be consumable. It needs to be interesting. I think the other thing we really wanted to emphasize is let's not fossilize old models of care and new technology. When I looked at the NHS plan and their plans for an NHS app, it said, well, we're going to have this section on my specialist, this section on my GP. And I thought, well, we're moving towards an MDT. So let's not avoid fossilising old models of care and new technology. I think it's an amazing opportunity to double down on personalised prevention, especially if they co-develop it with a single patient record. And what else did we talk about? The need for speed and the need to have a universal digital offer for all citizens. Understand the drive towards devolution of some responsibilities for commissioning to local levels and to ICSs and to regions. But I do think what's on the app, at least in terms of the types of services, it may not be the individual provider, but the types of services ought to be a universal digital offer, because that's where people's social contract is. It's with the NHS as a whole. This bit is about, it was called Doctor in Your Pocket in the 10-year plan, but we published a paper on essentially having really good triage and navigation. And I say this as a GP that used to sit in surgery and have people come in, and we spend a lot of time and money commissioning extra services in the NHS to try and reduce burden on primary care or reduce burden on secondary care. And what often we would create the capacity, but then we didn't really educate anybody about how to use it. And so somebody would come to me in GP clinic and say, well, I've got what I think is conjunctivitis, or I think I've got a red eye and I don't really know what's wrong with it. And I said, well, did you know we've commissioned this new service in Greenwich, and you can just walk into the opticians and they will look at it, and they've got a slit lamp there, and they've got all these other things that you need. And what's happened is, because we haven't navigated people properly, then we've used 2 appointments where originally there, where we wanted there to be one. So having really good triage and navigation is really important. Other health systems, I would say, have cracked this. So we looked at ADA, which is the triage and navigation app for Kaiser Permanente in the States. And they use AI to, and by the way, there's always a ripcord. You can always say, I want to speak to a human, but it's essentially like a kind of, it's like a digital AI 111 that it's meant to be an expert in you, an expert in the health system it's serving, so the NHS, it knows the directory of services, and an expert in sort of medicine, I mean, to an extent, in that you've trained it on its protocols or whatever. But anyway, to help people get to the right place first time and reduce inefficiency through the health system. Because, as I said, I think there's going to be increasing fragmentation in terms of providers, so you need to be able to navigate people. Now, this is the stuff that we've done on prevention. We've sort of taken quite a different approach to prevention. I'd be interested to hear what you think of it. The reason we've taken a different approach is because health systems like the NHS have been arguing with Treasury for decades that health is wealth. And I think you can argue with the Treasury until you're blue in the face that health is wealth, and they just don't believe you. And more money at the NHS is just more money into a black hole. And I think that it's true of certain populations and not others. So if you, the research that we did basically took 6 really common conditions that are very associated with taking time out of the workforce. And so they were CBD, cardiovascular disease, musculoskeletal, diabetes, COPD, cancer, and mental health. And essentially said, it was like magic wand scenario. What if you could wave your magic wand and reduce the incidences of these conditions by 20%? What would happen to GDP? And we showed through modelling that within 5 years, you could increase GDP by 0.75%, and within 10 years by 0.98%. And I think one of the critical things to come through from that was that, health is wealth. So if you make people healthier, if they can live longer, healthier, more productive lives, then they start to, we all know that a lot of money spent in the health service is spent in the last 18 months of life. And actually a lot of prevention isn't going to change that. But what it can do, if it can increase the amount of time that you spend paying into the system before you eventually take it out at the end, you can make it more financially sustainable. So it's not just about cost containment, it is about growth. And that was the thing that we were trying to prove with Treasury, is that actually a lot of this prevention can drive growth. And then the second point that we were trying to make is that you don't have to wait a generation to see the benefits. I think quite often one of the misaligned incentives is that people think that prevention is like, that'll help us in 20, 30 years. And actually what we wanted to show is you could have a real impact on GDP within the course of one term of government. This point is about the sort of forgotten middle, and this probably isn't news to you, but it was kind of, to me, I thought it was really interesting, which is that basically if you're looking at that health-wealth nexus, that kind of paying for people's prevention so they can keep in the workforce for longer, it's this middle, it's this age sort of 40, 50, 60 that is the most important, because above that there is a high incidence of disease but a low proportion of people are in work. Below that you've got lots of people in work but there's a low incidence of disease. If you target people in their midlife, then that's where you get the earliest payback in terms of prevention. And I think that's so interesting, because they're quite often the ones that get short shrift. And I say that as a GP who sort of, in a way, I mean, not necessarily, but you sort of gave them short shrift because you're always worried about the old person going off legs and the young person with a fever, but nobody's spending much time thinking about how do I stop this person who's got, who's overweight from becoming more overweight and then obese and then having a heart attack and then having stroke and then having all these things. It's just not on your sort of agenda. So I think this is a really interesting point to make. Just following on from the last slide, actually, it's about this new models of care. And I think for that age group, that people who are in their midlife, I'm not entirely convinced that it's GPs that are the right people to be delivering that kind of prevention. And I think actually what that group need more is a kind of low cost, light touch technical and tech and digital offer that is convenient and works around their lifestyle. And we started to look at different models that would start to deliver care either through the app or through what you might otherwise think of as traditional sort of consumer retailers like Boots or Tesco's or Asda or Superdrug or some of these other places. This final, or this slide here about prevention is about the basket of goods, because I think weight loss drugs really tested our commitment to prevention, actually, because we must have been, clutching our pearls for decades thinking, what are we going to do? Population's getting fatter and sicker, and won't somebody please invent a medication that can, target obesity? And then someone does. And then we turn around and go, oh, it's a bit expensive. And you just think, oh my God, and NICE came out with this recommendation that said that this is great value for money. We should be rolling this out to millions. And it was NHS England that turned around and pulled the ripcord and said, oh, I don't think we can afford it. We already spend 200 billion on the health service. We can't afford to offer this as well. When actually there's no structure to be able to reconfigure the basket of goods. There's no structural mechanism to say, actually, this stuff's really good. It's really good value. It's much better value for money for health and population health than some of this other stuff we're doing, and to reconfigure the basket of goods. So this paper focused a lot on that particular aspect. I'm going to finish off with a paper that we've been doing. We do also do life sciences stuff as well, and this is by no means all of it, but we've done one paper in the last year on biosecurity and biosecurity preparedness. And I thought it was very interesting that the risk of biological threat, both natural and man-made, and we look into that in the paper, the nature of those two threats has increased in recent years. If you look at the slide at the bottom, you've probably seen these sorts of graphs already, but this rising level of vaccine skepticism. And one of the big takeaways from me is that just simply that next time, I don't think a tent and a text is going to cut it, because of the level of sort of vaccine skepticism, and that being sort of prepared, there's so much work to do in terms of, having vaccine security and all of that, but principally whether people are ready and prepared to take a vaccine as and when they need it, I think is really, really important. And then just final slide. That's it. We're working on a paper at the moment with Jonathan Van Tam on this idea of vaccine sovereignty. And essentially, the premise of it is that in this increasingly sort of fragile geopolitical world where we have new conflicts and new tariffs, our vaccines supply chain starts to look increasingly more vulnerable. And I was really interested to learn, for instance, that we built, there was a new public-private partnership between the government and Moderna. We built a huge site in the UK to produce mRNA vaccines. About 90% of the substrate for mRNA vaccines comes from China. So I think that countries increasingly across the world are thinking about how they become more vaccine secure and work together with allies to kind of forge alliances. So within Europe, they've got this EU FAB scheme. Within the US, they're collaborating across federal states. And one of the things that we will be talking about is how the UK could potentially forge alliances. And maybe I don't think there is a world in which the UK will ever have total vaccine sovereignty and be able to produce every vaccine across every platform, mRNA, protein subunit, whatever. But I think there are ways that we could collaborate with trusted international allies to gain a bit more vaccine sovereignty. So that's it from me. It was just an opportunity to give you a sort of an insight into some of the insights that we're gaining from working globally, particularly with low and middle income countries, that impetus around the urgency of people feeling like the politics of issues, populism, and then some of the sort of practical stuff we've done about using technology to start to deliver that step change rather than just increments to the status quo.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I'll stop sharing my screen now. I'll just have a look and see if we've had any questions come in. So just give me a couple of minutes to have a look to see which ones are in review. I think we've just had one come in. If you can have a look in the Q&A tab, there should be one from Ankarad. Across 4 nations, we have very diverse populations and communities where there are many people who do not speak English as a first language, are living in poverty, who do not have access to newer tech, and differing levels of digital verbal literacy and confidence. The AI innovation in healthcare is very promising, but is there work going on by TBI that focuses on adjoining complementary interventions and solutions aimed at these groups of people, as otherwise we risk worsening inequalities?
Yeah. So my take on this is that I've sort of had two thoughts about it. One is that in allowing people a greater opportunity to take a tech option like the NHS app or whatever, you are what's the word? You're allowing more capacity within traditional face-to-face services to deal with people. And the example I always give is my brother, who's 3 years younger than me and has learning disabilities and wouldn't be able to navigate the NHS app. And he will always need to go to a GP practice and speak to a person. And in a sense, the NHS app isn't for him. But part of the reason for the tech isn't to be there for, and sometimes going down the route of trying to make the tech suitable for everybody makes it so it can actually make it more difficult to navigate. And I think that people who we want to go and use the app, I think we need to make the app as slick and as any other app that you would use, and intuitive and everything, and not try and make it should be accessible. It absolutely should. But I think part of the value of it is creating a route that people can go down and to expand capacity for people that need face-to-face services. So I think there's a little bit of there is an opportunity, especially with language barriers and things like that, to use automatic AI translation features within the app to make it more usable and broader.
We've had, I know we started 5 minutes late, so if you don't mind, there's one more question that's come in. This is from Nicola. It is important that the single patient record is not a drive towards an insurance-based health system in the UK, as this has been disastrous for public health in the American population. How can we ensure that this move to a single patient record and pooling of health information is used to optimise efficiencies in the NHS so it remains free at the point of entry and that people are free to continue to have autonomy over health decisions and ongoing access to free healthcare?
Yeah, I hope that came across, that that's exactly what I'm advocating for, which is that not that we ought to be going down some American model of insurance. It's simply that the NHS is an insurer. That's part of its role. In fact, it's like a massive ACO, accountable care organisation. It is both an insurer and a provider of services. And if you think about its insurer function, it's probably one of the things that people love most about the NHS is its insurer function. It's the fact that you pay according to your means, you take according to your need, and it's free at the point of use. And my point is that without data, and if you're operating in the dark, then the amount that you're able to deliver is going to be limited. With data, if you are able to understand the risk profile of your population, if you're able to understand where need sits, and then you're able to target the fixed amount of money that you have for health in a more effective way, then you can preserve those elements of paying according to your means, taking according to your need, and free at the point of use. It's absolutely not designed to say this is taking us into an insurer system. It's preserving. We've literally never needed this nationalised health insurance system more, where it pools risk across the whole population. And so, but the thing that will facilitate that is data, and being able to understand data and how to make the spending decisions more wisely. I hope that came through.
It did. Thank you so much. And thank you once again for taking the time to talk to us today, Charlotte. I'll hand back now to Andrew, who will be introducing our next AI-focused panel session. So thank you once again. Over to you, Andrew.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Again, it's my pleasure to invite our next speaker, Dr. Joshua Khan. Josh is a clinician by background, and now he's a public health registrar working in the South West Field Epidemiology Service. He completed a fellowship in clinical AI with NHS England last year, and he now co-chairs the Faculty of Public Health's AI and Digital Public Health Special Interest Group. So Joshua, a warm welcome, and we're going to continue our theme of AI. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and thank you everyone for having us here this afternoon. Really excited to talk to you about overcoming the barriers to the implementation of AI. Can we go to the next slide, please? We have got a variety of speakers here with us today. We've got Toby Nonamaka, Andy Appleyard and Sophie Ferguson, who have all been involved in the implementation of AI in their different organisations, and they're going to talk to you about kind of how they overcame the barriers to implementation of AI in their settings. Andrew's already introduced myself, so I won't say anything more about myself, but I would like to hear from you too. So we will have the Q&A throughout the session, but there's a Menti there as well. So if you could sign into that Menti. It's only got one question, and that question is, what are the biggest barriers for you and your organisation to implementing AI? And that will just help shape the Q&A later on in the session. We'll hear from the three speakers and then do the Q&A at the end, but I think that's all you need to hear from me. So without further ado, I'll pass on to our first speaker, Toby Nonamaka, who's from the Advanced Analytics team in UKHSA. He's going to talk to you a bit about what AI is before talking about the work he's done in particular. So yeah, thanks very much, Toby. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Josh. Hopefully you can hear me all right. If we move to the next slide, please. So yeah, I'll be talking about what sort of barriers to AI implementation we have in public health use cases. But I'll start by just introducing AI a bit. If we go to the next slide, please. I think that all presentations relating to AI need a slide that sort of asks, what the hell is AI? And the phrase artificial intelligence means a whole bunch of different things to a whole lot of different people, and it gets bandied about a lot. And I think it's really important when we're talking about applications of AI to make sure everyone's on the same page about what we're talking about. Generative AI tends to refer to deep learning models that can generate high quality text or images or other content based on training over vast swathes of data. And computers traditionally have been very good at certain problems like maths and logic, but there have been problems that are much easier for humans than computers. A simple example is if I give you a picture of a cat or a dog and ask you to say whether it's a cat or a dog, that's something that humans find very easy. But for a computer, it's hard because you have to come up for a list of rules for how to decide. And let's say if you give it the rule that dogs are bigger than cats, then suddenly all Chihuahuas are cats and all Maine Coons are dogs. And you run into difficulty there. The way that AI works is that you simply take a model and train it over a huge set of pictures of cats and dogs, and then it determines what individual pixels and the relationship between them increase or decrease the probability of a cat or a dog. And suddenly you've got a model that's able to perform that task. Similarly, with language or chatbots, it's doing a similar thing there, but instead of calculating likelihood of cat or dog from pixels, it's calculating the likelihood of the next word in a sentence based on understanding semantic distance between the words. For example, it understands if you say the cat sat on that the next word is likely to be something like mat or lap or laptop, and not something like happiness or togetherness. And this is something that's existed for a long time, usually referred to as machine learning. It's existed for decades, but what's changed more recently is that you've had advances in the capacity of these models, and the big one is you've had a huge amount of increase in the amount of computing power that can be supplied to them. So you've now got models that are big enough and have enough parameters that they've been trained across the board, such that they're broad enough. They've had broad enough training sets that they can be generalist, and you can have one model that can do the cat-dog identification, but also the language prediction and other things like that. Even within generative AI, it's crucial for us to know which model we're using and to talk about these in different terms. The fact that one model can or can't do a certain task doesn't mean another one can or can't do a certain task. Also, sometimes the same language gets used quite repeatedly. Like you have Microsoft Copilot is not the same as GitHub Copilot, is not the same as various other Copilots around. If we move on to the next slide, please. Within UKHSA and the sort of public health sphere, within the sort of AI work that goes on there, there's still a really broad set of area of things that we work across. And I think it's useful to sort of show that quite explicitly. So here we go from things at the bottom that have very few users to things at the top that are sort of general use by everyone, and things on the left that are very specific public health use cases, to things at the right that are more general tasks. So the top right area is something like, for example, using Copilot, rolling that out to people for use in day-to-day office tasks, which I think Sophie is going to talk about a bit more. I'm going to focus on the bottom left, which is the sort of specific public health use cases for public health tasks done by individual data scientists. And if we go to the next slide, please. One note, there is obviously lots of government guidelines for what we're allowed to do with AI in the public sector. Your individual body will likely have its own rules. For example, just one example, UKHSA specific rule is that we're not allowed to use the DeepSeek model, for example. But point here is, if you're thinking about using AI for work in civil service, please do check out what the government guidelines are and what specific guidelines there are for your government body. Thanks very much. If we go to the next slide. So I'd like to focus on one barrier to implementation, which is the lack of validation. And the question here is, anyone can chuck things into an AI and get results out, but how do you know how well your AI is performing? And this is something that can be quite hard to gauge, almost by definition, because of this black box nature of how the AI is trained across data and just gets the right results without you being clear on how it's done that. Just because an AI is performative at one task, will it be at another? For a given public health task, how well does it perform? And answering these sorts of questions is possible, but takes a significant amount of work. And if we can't do this, we can't really implement things, because we can't guarantee to stakeholders how well it performs. So I'm going to talk through one specific use case we have, which is a guidance discrepancy checker tool that my team has put together, but specifically with a view to how do we say how well this tool performs, given that it uses AI. And if we go to the next slide, please. A lot of benchmarking of LLMs is performed. If you go online, you'll see that for all the big large language models, the OpenAI ones and also open source ones, a lot of benchmarking is done to say this is how well they perform at certain tasks. And what there is less of, which my team has worked a lot on and produced these two papers, which I'll put in the chat afterwards in case they're of interest to people, is on specifically benchmarking large language models for public health tasks. So we've produced a whole bunch of public health tasks with manual annotation that large language models can be tested on, and tested a wide array of models on them to see how well they perform at these tasks. And again, it's on the point that just because one large language model is the best performing at sort of generalist tasks, it doesn't mean that it will be the best performing public health related ones. And if we go to the next slide, what this has allowed us to do internally is that by testing these models on all of these tasks and seeing how well they perform, we can determine firstly what's the best model generally at these tasks and use that as our default model to use internally. We can also determine if any smaller models, for example, are sufficiently performative at a given task that we could choose to use those instead, whereby if it's smaller, it takes less time to run, it's less uses less energy and therefore has less environmental impact and things like that. But the point is that by taking a broad approach to evaluation, that allows us early on to answer a question which will remain relevant throughout, which is which model do we use, how well does it perform? And if we go on to the next slide, I will quickly talk through the guidance discrepancy checker. So this is a piece of work that we've done in collaboration with the central guidance team in UKHSA, which is, can we produce a tool that can identify recommendations in guidance. So what in guidance is a recommendation versus just another sentence, and can it determine discrepancies between some guidance you're writing and the existing corpus of guidance. And if we go to the next slide, please. So the first part of this task was just taking all guidance available on gov.uk. So this is just publicly available guidance, nothing sensitive about it. Scraping all of that and putting it into the tool such that you've got a huge corpus of documents that you can compare with. And if, again, AI, the one thing that AI is very good at is working across a large quantity of free text. So we scraped all of that, and then on the next slide, then we can perform searching across new guidance that you're writing, and embedding both in the new written guidance and the existing corpus to determine what bits of guidance, what words in guidance are close to each other. And this is closeness in semantic space. So we actually do a hybrid search which combines two things. It looks for keywords that are uncommon and unique to the text. So if two pieces of text both talk about pertussis, they're likely to be related. But then in addition to that, it also does this semantic search, which works out how similar in meaning or how close to each other different words are. So for example, trainers are closer to shoes than trainers are to trains, even though those are similar words, and a keyword search might think those are close, but a semantic search will actually say they're quite different. So this is how we retrieve relevant text for comparison. And then on the next slide, and then, so this process allowed us to produce a tool which sits in a dashboard whereby a person writing guidance can write that guidance into the the square on the left here, the guidance text chunk, and they can copy and paste what they've written there, and it will check against every piece of existing UKHSA guidance, and it will suggest, the model will suggest, based on its understanding of the closeness of words, where it thinks a discrepancy exists, and the person writing the guidance can then look at that and decide whether or not that's correct or not, and amend the guidance they're writing, or possibly they know that there's a discrepancy and that's the intent of writing new guidance which will replace old guidance, and so on. But a key point being that we keep the final decision is always made by the actual person, the guidance writer. The tool just prioritizes which discrepancies to look at. And so that's how the tool works, and I've gone through that quite quickly, but the main point here that I want to make is not about how it works, but rather that it's one thing to put this tool together and say go away and use it, but really this isn't something we could implement if we just did that. Crucially, we now need to say how well does this tool actually work at this task. And if we go to the next slide, there's a lot of different reasons why that might be difficult to do. Firstly, we're talking about quite sort of closely related terms like recommendation and conflicting advice. These are both subjective things that need to be identified. So with existing subject matter experts, we made protocols to precisely define this, and then had the team produce loads of manual labels so that you can perform this comparison. And actually you need to do manual work in the first instance to check that the model's work is matching it. So if we go to the next slide, there were basically 3 steps in this task, which were sort of in the project of putting this guidance discrepancy checker together. Text extraction and pre-processing was one, then finding recommendations was another, and then finding discrepancies between those recommendations is a third. And all 3 of these stages required validation and manual validation. So if you can click through, please, once or twice. Thanks. So the crucial thing is that every one of these steps required validation, required manual work, required going through, and then we can get an accuracy score or a precision for each of these different processes. And these scores that we produced are quite high, which is good. But the crucial thing is not how high is it, but rather, is it sufficient for the task that's required? So are the team that are working on this happy that this percentage is good enough for what they want to do? And that's really it. The point is that validation can be done, but it takes a lot of work, and it is a crucial step. And if we go to the last slide, so just in summary, so as I say, validation is crucial. It requires a lot of work, including manual annotation, including domain expertise, and it needs to be done separately on different use cases. The fact that we've done it for this guidance checker doesn't mean that we can guarantee that a model will also have 90+% accuracy at a different use case. It also means that extending from one use case to another isn't necessarily trivial, because you need to do this validation again, and it's a crucial step. But the ultimate result of it is that you have users who can confidently say how well the process works, whether it works well enough for their purposes, and how well it works compared with just purely manual approach. And this allows people to use AI with confidence that it's not messing up their task in unexpected ways. It's not performing much worse than they might expect. They're not subject to large hallucinations or things like that. That's it from me. Hopefully that wasn't too long. I will pass back to Josh.
Thank you very much, Toby. That's really helpful and really interesting to see some of these Menti points coming through, and noting that cynicism and trust kind of align with those the idea of validating and make sure it's the right tool for the job. I'll now pass over to Andy Appleyard, who's Director of Adult Social Care at Derby City Council, and he'll be talking to you about some of the work he's been doing there. Andy.
Thanks, Josh. Do you want to just take us on to the next slide? So, hi everybody, my name's Andy Appleyard. I'm the Director of Adult Social Care at Derby City Council. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and have a conversation with you all about the work that we're doing in Derby. Some of it working incredibly well, some of it that we're grinding through. And I think some of the things that I'll talk about dovetail very much with what Toby's talked about. I don't have as long to speak to you, so I'll try and get through some of the slides that I've got, but also just talk around some of the main points, because I do think it's helpful to be able to have the questions and answers rather than anything else. This initial slide that I've got for you just sets the scene about AI transformation across Derby City Council. You can see there that adult social care is part of our transformation phase 1. We as a local authority, as all of the local authorities up and down the country, have got a statutory need to balance our budget on an annual basis. That's a financial pressure for a small unitary authority like Derby City Council, especially one that has low council tax and business rates, and also struggles with higher levels of deprivation in certain parts of the city. So as we started out on our AI transformation journey, we started to work with a specific AI organisation, and they talked to us about some of the AI functionality of specific types of AI. So again, going back to what Toby talked about in terms of how do you get the right product to do the right job for you. And some of the functionality that was available was some low-level question answering. So we've got Darcy and Ali that support us at the front door. They answer huge amounts of questions and queries that come through to the council. But when we initially set that process up, it was quite basic questions that they could ask us. So when are you coming to collect my bin? Can I get a blue badge? Those sorts of things. Some quite there was a formula behind answering specific questions for people. So if you had the right postcode and you had a certificate from your GP, you could look at possibly getting a blue badge. And we also could check your postcode and let you know when someone was coming to collect your bin. What that meant for us was that we could find efficiencies across the council, and we could do that by making redundancies, which probably put us in quite a difficult position about then asking other parts of the organisation to start to adopt artificial intelligence. So that's kind of some scene setting for you. As I talk about what we're trying to do in adult social care, we're looking to create a product that does a number of different things we were looking to create a product that would do a number of different things for us. So it would record and transcribe conversations. which meant that when our social workers were out sitting in people's homes or sitting in care services, sitting in the hospital in certain circumstances, and understanding if somebody's got eligible care and support needs or not, they would be able to have a direct one-to-one conversation, and they wouldn't sit there with a pen and a pad saying, I'm really sorry, I know you're pouring your heart out to me, but could you just repeat that? I just need to make sure that I've recorded that correctly. So we wanted to create a product that would do some of the heavy lifting for our staff. As it evolved, we found that the artificial intelligence would be able to look at the needs profile of anybody we conducted an assessment or review for. It would be able to assess that specific needs profile against all of the other people that we held in our internal system, so everybody else we delivered care and support for, and it would be able to provide a number of options about how those needs were met. So it could do things like recommending technology for people, or recommending equipment that we could use to support people more effectively. So in essence, it would get us to a point where the offer that we had was mirrored across everybody that we would have conversations with. For us, in essence, everybody would be having a conversation with the best and most updated and knowledgeable social worker that we had within the council. But as I say, on the back of making redundancies, us having conversations about how we involved social workers in those conversations became a little bit tricky for us. So social workers were quite reluctant about where does AI start and where does the role of the social worker start, kind of what's the points between those two specific roles within the organisation. So something that we set out very, very early on was that there would always be a human in the loop. So our strapline in adult social care is that artificial intelligence doesn't make decisions about people. People make decisions about people. So we've had a number of sessions with our internal colleagues and had to go through the process of kind of just making sure we were very, very clear about what we wanted artificial intelligence to do and how it would work in different spaces for us. Can I see the next slide, please, Josh? So this slide just kind of sets the scene in terms of what we were looking to try and do. So you can see they're implementing a smart notes product and practitioner focus on human interaction rather than note taking and that transcription of any conversation that staff were having. So we found ourselves in a situation where we were running different pilots with staff from adult social care, and we had some people that were incredibly keen to use the artificial intelligence that they were taking advantage of in their daily lives, how they could bring that into their work. And we had some of the people that were at complete polar opposite, were dead set against using artificial intelligence in any way. But we've run a number of sessions across the council, and what we've always tried to do is look at how we can push on open doors. So we've got some staff that have got a specific caseload, and they're seeing staff far more frequently. They're seeing people far more frequently than the member of staff that will sit next to them. We've got some staff that come back after a visit and they are typing up all of their notes, and we've got other staff that have had their conversation recorded and transcribed by the artificial intelligence. So it really puts them in a different position where they are now spending 90% of their day interacting with people and looking at what are the solutions that we need to find in your life to ensure that you can be as independent as possible and you can live the life that you want to live. And we've got other members of staff that are still spending 60% of their time trying to type up notes and work through support plans and risk assessments and a whole range of other things. So the AI is doing some of the heavy lifting for our internal staff and allowing them to spend more time with people, which in essence is why our social workers come to work. Can I see the next slide, please, Josh? Thank you. So this just kind of sets out some of the time-saving reductions that the artificial intelligence has been able to do for us. So it sits there in terms of some of the safeguarding alert generation that the AI can pick up and do. When our staff have gone out and conducted an assessment of somebody, it picks up the risks and understands what we need to refer to different parts of our organisations. It's got information in there in terms of care plan generation. So if we find a duplicated needs profile and we've already got a care plan that's been created, the AI can pull that information out of our system and make a recommendation about what a care plan could look like. It's not the AI writing a care plan for us, it's pulling information from our internal system, so it's duplicating what other social workers have done previously. I think the last thing that I would probably like to mention is the fact that very early on our AI journey, the council made the decision to set up an ethics and compliance board. So a lot of the conversations that we're having in our organisation are about AI can do lots of things for us, but where do we see it as it will add additionality to the work that our individuals, our staff want to do, and where do we see it as taking over? So for us in Derby City Council, we've created a product that allows our staff to spend more time with individuals, fixing issues in their lives, rather than doing some of the things that we're talking about on this screen. So we utilise the Ethics and Compliance Board to work out where are some of our red lines, what do we want AI to do for us, and where do we want our individuals to be always having conversations. So we've had some proposals about the AI can contact people and we can have conversations with them, or we can gather information from them about whether or not they want us to conduct an annual review. And then can do work for us in terms of how do they prioritise who needs to have a review. That's an area that we're not looking to explore at the moment, because we want our staff to be having conversations with people about what's happening in their lives, rather than the AI gathering information from people. So for us, we're still in that space of are we getting the balance right, but really what we're trying to do, as I say, is just allowing our social workers to really come to work to do the things that they always wanted to do, which is have conversations with people on a daily basis. How do we free our staff up to be able to do those things, rather than getting bogged down with some of the compliance and some of the other things that they've got sucked into, as that's part of the daily operating of a local authority. I'll finish there, Josh. As I say, I'll try and leave some time to answer some questions. I think that'll be more beneficial. So thanks, colleagues.
Thanks very much, Andy. Really interesting. And often I think you see ethics as a big hitter on the kind of implementation barriers, and a really interesting approach to see that ethics board as a way to overcome that. Our final speaker for today is Sophie Ferguson. Sophie Ferguson is a data scientist in UKHSA. She'll be talking to you about something perhaps a bit more relatable, which is the use of Copilot in UKHSA. So I'll pass over to Sophie now. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so if I could just skip to the next slide. So I've been kind of supporting the evaluation and kind of initial trial of Microsoft Copilot in UK Health Security Agency. So I guess initially, I know probably a lot of people are familiar with Microsoft Copilot, so I'll try and flick through this slide quite quickly, particularly because we want to leave some time for questions at the end. But yeah, just to kind of give a bit of an overview of what Copilot is. So essentially, Copilot leverages large language models, primarily based off of OpenAI's models. So these are the same used in ChatGPT, and it integrates them with the Microsoft 365 suite. One of the kind of benefits of Copilot is that it basically kind of integrates AI into your existing security and privacy policies for Microsoft. So it means that it's secure to use it, and it means that you can process your internal documents without Copilot then storing that data and kind of using that data to retrain the large language model. This, like I should say here, like this is where you have kind of Copilot integrated into your Microsoft license. There is also a kind of like free option for Copilot as well, which is public, where that does use use the data put into it to retrain the model. So Copilot can be used for kind of many things, and anything that you can use AI for, really. This can include like email drafting, creating documents, summarizing documents, automating meeting notes at a click of a button, which is quite useful, code assistant, and kind of various other tasks. And in our organisation, we have different levels of licenses available. So recently, Copilot Chat, which is kind of like, I guess, a kind of secure version of like ChatGPT, that's available with kind of for all users now. So just with the Microsoft account. So basically, this is a secure chatbot, and you can upload documents that are internal to it and ask it to kind of summarize that. There is also a license that has that free version, but it also kind of allows you to use the automated meeting notes version. And then there is another license called Copilot Pro, which integrates these AI capabilities more seamlessly with Microsoft 365 apps. So the kind of chatbots are available in all the different apps, like directly, which makes it a bit more seamless. And it also has access to your emails and SharePoint, so it can kind of find things for you. And if we could move on to the next slide, please, Josh. Great. So how have we been rolling out so far? So we did do a kind of initial testing of Copilot with just one team, and have since been implementing a larger trial, which just finished last Friday, actually. And in the larger trial, we had 76 participants across 20 teams for 3 months that had access to the licensed Copilot. We collected data on usage in a variety of ways, such as kind of collecting the actual usage statistics of Copilot, and also kind of running a survey. But the main kind of data source we used was diary data on self-reported usage, where users can report how they use Copilot, the estimated time savings of that task, and their perception on the accuracy and ease of use. So from the kind of the points included on the slides, at that point we had achieved over 1,000 diary points. We have achieved more since. And generally the findings do suggest that Copilot is performing well. So it's generally got kind of high accuracy or moderate accuracy across all use cases that we were testing. High accuracy in particular on intelligent meeting recap, prioritization, email drafting, requesting for context, search functionality, and summarization. And we've also kind of seen average time savings across all use cases as well. This doesn't mean that it kind of worked in every single instance, but as an average, that we have seen time savings across everyone. Yes, the highest average time savings that we've had reported so far are for the automated meeting notes, using Copilot to generate ideas, using Copilot to kind of search for things within SharePoint, and using Copilot to prioritize your workload. And if we could just move to the next slide, I will cover, so the barriers and challenges faced, because that's kind of the main thing that we've been discussing in this session. I've kind of included just like a few groups of barriers on there, although I'll focus on more than others because some have already been touched on. But I think one of the things that's kind of come up is around kind of data security and compliance. So we have kind of implemented a code of conduct that people need to sign before they use Copilot to say that they won't kind of upload personal data into it. And we have also implemented a process where people can report any security breaches if this comes up. I think one of the things that has become clear is it is quite, I would say, like, it's very useful to be very integrated with some of these security features that Microsoft makes available to like kind of protect against like people misusing Copilot. For example, there are some security features in Microsoft where you can like label documents with the appropriate, with different security classifications, and then Copilot, if you kind of put something into Copilot that was like too high a security classification, then it would like prevent you from working on it. So that's quite useful, but obviously it means that like you have to kind of have that system set up, and that has to be used throughout your organization to use that in the first place. And I think the other thing is around kind of making sure that people have access only to the right areas in SharePoint, because the Copilot Pro license does have access to your SharePoint. So if you're asking questions but you have access to kind of different teams areas, then it might kind of bring back information that they wouldn't necessarily have shared with you. So it's just kind of important to make sure that those like security measures are appropriately in place when you want to use Copilot. On user adoption and change management, yes, I know like Andy touched on this mostly earlier, but yeah, we've found yeah, we found kind of like adoption rates varying by department and previous familiarity with AI tools. We also have been mainly focusing on kind of like early adopters, so like we're not kind of forcing people to use it at this point. So although there has been kind of expressed hesitation around AI, I don't think we're kind of pushing too hard at this point to kind of, I guess, to get everyone using it regularly. But one of the things that we are doing is just making sure to implement really clear training programs so people know how to use the AI most effectively. And so, yeah, just so like people feel comfortable with using it, and so also so they know what they kind of shouldn't be doing with it. On accuracy and reliability, yeah, similar just to the points that Toby made, really. I think it kind of links to the training point, just really making that point that the outputs can be inaccurate or generic, and so it's just really important that people do check the outputs before they just kind of send it off and just trust the AI too much. And then finally, just on cost, value, and realization. So I think this has been something that has been quite challenging, actually, because obviously with the Copilot licenses, there is an investment required. And kind of demonstrating cost realization clearly has been quite challenging because that kind of varies quite a lot by team. One of the reasons it's been challenging is because Microsoft has been changing what the free offer is, like kind of throughout our evaluation, and will continue to change what it is. So that can make that quite challenging to actually evaluate for. Another thing is, so I guess like how we've kind of tried to do it is we've just been collecting kind of self-reported time savings, but collecting those really concrete time savings is quite difficult for teams where they do lots of different varied tasks as opposed to doing similar things all the time. However, I would just like kind of make a final point on this, that like there are arguably, I guess, some unseen costs if we don't kind of integrate with AI, because when this kind of increasingly becomes the norm, I guess, across the workforce, then we risk kind of falling behind on not kind of upskilling people on the latest tools. So yeah, in summary, I mean, Copilot we've seen has kind of offered substantial benefits from the trial that we've run. However, there are kind of several barriers and challenges in implementing it. It's been really good to kind of have this discussion with you all, so we can kind of tackle them together. But yeah, I'll pass over to Josh for the Q&A section.
Thanks very much, Sophie. Really appreciate that. Really interesting, because I think Copilot is much more accessible, but still requires all those kind of steps to ensure it's used responsibly and safely. Should we take down the slides for a moment and get the panelists back on screen and answer these questions that have been in the chat and through the Menti? Please do add questions in the Q&A and like the ones you want answers to, and I'll also pick a few from the Menti itself. I can see already that there's a question here about environmental impact with a couple of likes to it from Sharon Walton. The question is, AI has a huge environmental impact, e.g. water needed for cooling data centres. How do we ensure we are using AI responsibly? Who would like to take that one? Toby, go ahead.
Happy to make a start, but others might want to add things as well. So yeah, you're absolutely right that it does have a significant environmental impact, and this is something we definitely need to engage with, like, very directly. So the reason for the impact, for people who don't know, is that with the increase in AI, basically these require large data centers, so deployments have been built to house those, which have significant electricity costs and then also significant water usage for cooling. There are two different processes we tend to talk about with AI, which are training and inference. So training is when you run over the whole data set, and inference is just when you personally go on ChatGPT and ask it a question. That bit is inference. Training as a process is much, much more costly in terms of energy and so on than inference, but inference is performed by a lot more people. Half the world are going on ChatGPT or whatever and asking it questions, so that also has a significant impact. I think one thing that is important is to try and give ourselves a sense of what the real scale of these things are. So It's a little bit hard to tell, but my understanding is that a single ChatGPT inference, so a single prompt, is roughly comparable in terms of environmental cost to something like 5 to 10 Google searches, and much less than, for example, continuous HD video streaming. So in terms of that, as a personal sort of rule of thumb, my approach is that if I can effectively do a task that would be roughly the equivalent of needing 10 Google searches with a single Copilot inference, then I'm very happy to do that. In terms of how we approach things on public health use cases in UKHSA, the general rules I'd say we stick to are ensuring we only use AI when it can actually make a difference. So if you've got a use case that it's working for and that it's better than existing methods, and obviously like existing processes also have a significant environmental impact, then that's a good thing to do. Ensuring you use a model of appropriate size for the task in question. I think a large part of the environmental issue is that these models are getting bigger, and this problem is likely to continue to get bigger in future as these models become good at generalist all tasks. If you can have a model that's considerably fewer parameters but still does a good job of the task you need, then you want to be using that one. And then just to say that environmental impact is something that's being considered by the UKHSA AI Security Compliance and Responsible Use Task and Finish group. So there are groups at UKHSA thinking about this question specifically as well. But it's a good question. It's one that's not going away, and it's one to which the answer is probably it's okay to use AI, but to use it in a way that makes sense and is responsible.
Thanks, Toby. I'm mindful there's only a minute left for our time slot, so I'm going to not spend any more time on environmental impact, and I'm going to have a quick question on fear, lack of understanding, and understanding in AI. Andy, go ahead. I think you had your hand up.
Oh, well, that's not fair, Josh. I feel like I've been looped into a different question. I was just going to say that the previous question was fantastic. As a council, we've got a net zero policy. So there's about offsetting there, I think. But as an organisation, we will have an impact. So it's about how you manage that. Repeat the question for me, Josh, please.
So it came up in the Menti. It was about how people's barriers being fear, understanding, or lack of understanding.
Yeah, I think the thing for us is adult social care is not forcing people to do this. So this is about how we bring people along the journey for us. In any organisation, whenever I've spoken about artificial intelligence, I've been able to draw an imaginary line down the centre of a room and say 50% of people really want to try and use this product and understand how it will positively impact this work, and 50% of people are really nervous. I don't think me standing at the front as the Director of Adult Services saying we're all going to use this, it's going to drive efficiencies, is the way forward. We've taken a very different approach where we are leaning on the staff that are seeing significant benefits in the way that they are utilising artificial intelligence. So it's more of a coaching and a supportive role where staff are sitting in a room together and saying, crikey, it's just taken me 3 hours to write a support plan for somebody or a health application in terms of funding. How have you managed to do that so quickly? How are you going out on your next visit? So it's really about how do we support people at different stages and different levels of confidence. Obviously, we're doing training. Obviously, we're doing drop-in sessions. But at the moment, we don't have any direction to say everybody must use artificial intelligence. So we're asking colleagues to support colleagues to understand the benefits. So more of a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach.
Thanks very much, Andy. I'm very mindful that we've now hit time, so apologies not being able to answer any more of the questions, but I think it's probably best for us to hand back to the people hosting the session today, Helen and Andrew.
Well, thank you all so much, Sophie, Joshua, Andrew, Toby, for your time. It was really interesting. I'm glad we got through a couple of questions, and if you don't mind, the ones we didn't get to, I'll put them to you so we can get a response offline, if that's okay. Thank you very much. We've now got time for a 45-minute lunch break, so everyone can go and stretch their legs, have a bit of a comfort break. We have had a couple of requests for some networking space. So my colleague in a second will be opening up a networking breakout room. So for anyone that did want to go on there, I'll jump in and I can unmute you and you can have a bit of a discussion in there if you want to. But otherwise, we'll be back here for our concurrent sessions, which will start at 1:30. Thank you all once again.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Smart, and I'm running the workshop. I think we've got about 40 minutes this afternoon. I've got slides to show you, but I'm also happy to take questions as well as we go through. A little bit about myself. I'm a moderator of the UK PHR. I also continue to do assessments. If I'm doing assessments, and I obviously can't do the moderation. I've also been a verifier of the practitioner route as well. I did that for a number of years. And my own registration actually was in 2007, and I revalidated 3 times. So I've been through a whole load of processes with this. One of my memories, I was listening to the speakers this morning, they were really interesting actually about their journeys onto UK PHR registration route. The box I had, because we had to send in 5 copies, I actually couldn't pick that box up. And I remember I had to get someone to help me carry the box to the post office to get it all sent off. And thank goodness we're not doing that anymore on that one. So if I can have my next slide, please. That's great. Okay, so and it's, in fact, it's been touched on this morning. So the UK PHR is Professional Standards Authority, and it sets standards, and really it's about protecting the public and inspiring public confidence from the person going through the registration process. It's about setting good standards here, appropriate education and training. The UK PHR also deals with complaints, any complaints about the process as well. There's a whole process in place around that in case people are concerned or worried that they've been treated fairly. If I can have my next slide, please. Okay, so expectations for someone who wishes to join the specialist registration route is a mandatory standard for CPD and annual professional appraisal, and also an annual review of registration on a 5-year revalidation cycle. And I mentioned earlier, I have done 3 years of 5-yearly revalidation, and also there's fitness to practice, and this mirrors what consultants in public health do as well. So fitness to practice, there's some questions, and you have to submit a form on an annual basis about your fitness. Some of it is around health, some of it is around probity. And the next set of slides, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Often people wonder if it's worth it. I mean, from my own experience, it was definitely worth it. My number is actually 0288, so you can see I was fairly early on in the registration process, but it definitely opened doors for me. It's extremely hard work because I was working full time, and I remember it was all my days really. It seemed to go on forever. But it's an excellent review for a CPD, builds self-confidence, to be really competent against all the key areas, and I'll show you those in a minute. And you get an idea about what you do know and what you don't know. It can, in terms of your own achievements, it can bring home what you've done and the work that you've achieved in the past. And also it's a time of reflection as well. I would certainly say from my perspective, it was a career ladder opening opportunity, and someone actually said it earlier. I was someone who did often say, I'll do that, I'll take that on, that piece of work, with a view to developing within my career, and without the registration it just gave me so many more opportunities as well. So but have the next slide, please. Thank you. I'm not going to go through all of these. These are the 9 key competency areas, and these mirror the ones that are on the Faculty of Public Health training curriculum for the registrars. So I won't go through all of those. You're probably familiar with them. And what we assess is it's the know-how and show-how. So part of the assessment process is how you've gained your knowledge around these areas, and the other part is about how you've demonstrated what you've learned and how you put it into practice. And this number 9 here is about professional, personal, ethical development as well, which runs through all of them. If I can have next slide, please. I've already said that it's based on the key areas of the 2022 curriculum, but it isn't totally identical, and that's because it's a retrospective portfolio. It's not a developmental route, which is kind of what the portfolio is. It's retrospective, so it can't mirror exactly the same, but the outcomes are the same. I was thinking, I suppose I was thinking about the 2022 curriculum. It is due for an update. Sometimes people say that UK PHR does change what it puts in terms of the know-hows and show-hows, but in terms of keeping up with the Faculty of Public Health curriculum, there are changes, continuous changes that have to be addressed. And you'll see that with some of the know-hows and show-hows, they are actually grouped together. So the next slide, please. There are two stages now. There's the pre-application stage, and there's also the portfolio stage. So you can't do the portfolio, you can't put in a portfolio until the pre-application stage has gone through, got a letter from UK PHR inviting you to put in the portfolio. So there's some criteria to be met here. So the applicant needs to be working at the right level. So that will be a senior role. They need to be participating in a formal CPD programme, and they need to have an appraisal system in place with 1 year of pre-application. Most workplaces can provide that appraisal process. They need support from the employer. A lot of people, you've heard people talk about how they approach their portfolios, and they talk about spending evenings, early mornings. I spent a lot of my time, my Saturdays doing it. But even so, you do need support from the employer, because to gain some of the know-hows and the show-hows, it does dovetail it. Well, of course it will do, into areas of work. You need to be able to demonstrate competence against all the key areas. And in terms of the actual process, two assessors agree the assessment and then discuss with peers at a registration panel. And those panels are on a monthly basis. If a refusal is offered at the feedback meeting, if there is a refusal, a feedback meeting is offered, and the applicant has up to 3 attempts, and then it suggests that people wait a couple of years before reapplying. And if there's 3 attempts, it's possibly they've not got the range of know-how or show-how experience and knowledge that they can demonstrate. Just go on to the next slide, please. Along with the application form, quite a lot of information is required. The matrix is absolutely key to developing a portfolio, and with this you can map out your know-hows and your show-hows, and from that you can work out any gaps and develop a plan about how you're going to meet those gaps. So that's a really important piece of work to be done early on. There's a job description that you need to submit, a CV, evidence of most recent appraisal, 360-degree feedback, development plan. The reference is really, really important as well. So that should be from your line manager who's known you for at least 1 year within the past 3 years. And all copies of qualifications and membership should be certified as well. And the fitness of practice declaration put in, and of course the payment of the appropriate fee. So if you can just go on to the next slide, please. I've already said a little bit about the matrix. The main point of it really is to help you identify any gaps in evidence. I think I'll probably just leave them because I've already said quite a lot about the matrix, and what the assessor will be looking for when they assess pre-application is how those gaps are going to be addressed, and the assessors do actually check for this. Just go on to the next slide, please.